Alright, we're gonna wait till 9:30 and then we're gonna start. So I'm gonna do this story time a little bit differently than yesterday. How this is gonna work is that I'm actually gonna be reading off the computer script since I realized that I don't have the video. I don't have the screen recording feature on for Streamlabs, and so I think that now I think it'll work better for me to read off the computer and into the mic, and so I think that's how we're gonna do this. Because yesterday I used my phone for the script, so I'm gonna go get a soda too because this is gonna be a long one. Yep. Alright, we'll wait 5 more minutes and then we'll begin. start in a minute. Alright, we're going to start in 3, 2... Okay, I wasn't ready. We're going to start in 3, 2, 1. Junior year is generally the most important school year of your life. This is the school year colleges look at, from GPA to ACT scores to standardized test scores and more. For me, though, I'd say this is only the second most important school year, as I still think that 8th grade was my most important school year, but that's for me personally. But since last Friday was my last day of junior year, I thought I would go ahead and discuss the school year as a whole. Overall, this was one of, if not the most unusual school year ever. I'm Zach, and this is Storytime 22, on May 28th, 2021. So this story time will be quite similar to my story time on D Now 2021, as this time period was very recent. As mentioned before, I just finished junior year last Friday, therefore, I'll be able to remember a lot more about this period than I normally would had I made this video from 2 years from now. Now, the way the story time will work is that I will first discuss the backstory. Afterwards, I'll briefly discuss the summer of 2020, then I will discuss how junior year worked differently than other school years, and then I'll discuss junior year. So where do I go to school? Well, I go to an early college high school. It's basically where you get both a high school diploma and an associate's in either arts or science when you graduate high school. I applied to go here in 8th grade and got accepted. It's definitely been an amazing experience to go here. As I mentioned in my 8th grade story time that I was bullied a ton and had to deal with a bunch of troublemakers preventing me from learning. Oh, and by the way, I'm going for my associate in science. Now, to understand junior year, we need to go back to March 15th, 2020. I was a sophomore. Now, this would be the day that our school went on lockdown for 2 weeks after coronavirus began plaguing the world. Ultimately, this lockdown would turn into the rest of the school year. As a result, I and everyone else had to do online school. A lot of people complained about online school. For me, I actually didn't mind it much because it helped me get my work done on time and I was not getting bored easily. Now let's discuss the summer of 2020. So because everything was shut down, I had very little over the summer. I did go on vacation to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, around mid-July, but even then I did very little. So overall, this is not a very eventful summer. I did, however, take 2 summer college courses during the summer of 2020. I took World Civilizations and Business Law. Both of these courses were extremely enjoyable and very interesting, mainly because I was doing them on my own time. I made a 95 in both courses. Another thing too I want to mention is getting my own truck. So my grandfather died in 2016, and he left behind his truck in my name, which I mentioned in Storytime 15. I was only 12 when he died, so therefore, my grandmother kept the truck in good shape for 4 years. On July 1st, 2020, about a week and a half after my 60th birthday, she finally handed over the truck. It felt awesome, having not just any vehicle, but my grandfather's truck. However, I did not have my license just yet, as that would come in August. Therefore, I couldn't do much with this truck until then. Now, before I get into junior year, I want to talk about how it was different than previous school years. So our school was split into 3 groups: Cohort A, Cohort B, and Remote. I was Cohort A. This meant that I went to school on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, I would be remote. They did this in order to be able to maintain social distancing standards. This would last all the way until after spring break, which I'll mention happened there. As a result, there were only about maybe 50 students at school at a time. We of course had to wear masks all day at school, which kind of bothered me as it was pretty hard to breathe, and I also wear glasses, so they got fogged up all the time. But I mean, I don't make the rules, so I just had to go with the flow. Another change too is that everything we submitted was submitted online. Normally, we might take tests or quizzes in class, but because we could no longer do anything on paper, we had to switch to doing everything online. I think I did better with this format, mostly because I wasn't rushed like I could do whenever I wanted to. Since my brain works best at around 10:30 at night, that's when I did it, and did a lot of the quizzes, tests, and just other schoolwork in general. And by the way, 10:30 is generally the time I work on story times, in case you're wondering. Now let's talk about the first day of junior year, being August 17th, 2020. So this is a much later than we normally started. They simply did this because of coronavirus. As a result, this year would end later, as the last day was today. Normally, it would begin the second week in August and in 2 weeks before Memorial Day, but then COVID came and messed things up. Or so I thought. I'll discuss the change in schedule near the end of today's video. So let's talk about my schedule. So my first class of the day was American History 1. Now probably the most infamous part about this class was the teacher. I knew this teacher prior to this class. I had a study hall with him in both freshman and sophomore year. Now, I actually have a class with him. He was always really cool. He referred to me as Brother Baynard, although I'm not sure why. He also would have a lot of voice cracks, which were always very funny. I'll actually mimic him for a story time on September 3rd, so watch out for that. My next class was seminar. So this year, intensives were a bit odd. Because of coronavirus, we could not go on field trips. Normally, in the second week of school, juniors would stay at Brevard College for 2 nights. But because of coronavirus, we could not do that. So therefore, intensives kind of did not have much of a point. They were really just there to be there. I can't complain too much though, as this was during very unusual times. There would be another trip canceled, which I'll get to when we get there, but this assignment will be discussed in a little bit, so I'll talk about it later. For the first week of school, it was simply a study hall. Next up is lunch and crew. So in order to maintain social distancing guidelines, we had to eat lunch in our crew rooms. I'll discuss crew in its own story time 11, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Crew up until October though was quite interesting, as I was the only student. Yeah, it was just me and my freshman English teacher. We got along very well, so it's all good. Later on we'd get another student, but that won't be until October. Now let's jump to study hall. So the reason I had the study hall is because normally we were supposed to take a math class called quantitative literacy in the 11th grade. I, however, took it in 10th grade, as I finished all of my high school math requirements in 9th grade, so I was ahead. Therefore, this is simply a study hall for me. Now let's move on to chemistry. So like American history, this teacher was also interesting. The reason was because I actually had this teacher in middle school for Science Olympiad, as well as for Earth and Environmental Science in 8th grade. She managed to get the job here after our old chemistry teacher left. She was really good. Her class was always very fun, and is definitely a class I miss quite a lot. We did a ton of experiments and got to do a bunch of fun stuff, as we didn't have a final exam. Oh, and by the way, all final exams were waived for this entire school year for all classes. EOC courses were not waived, but that doesn't matter since I wasn't taking any EOC courses. Finally, we have Spanish. This is a college course. It was pretty enjoyable, as our teacher was always very fun and entertaining, but it was kind of forgettable. Now then, there is a writing course, Writing and Inquiry. It was an online college course. Overall, it was easy and actually kind of enjoyable, mostly because I love and am really good at writing. I didn't like my professor too much though, mostly because he would grade my papers and did not tell me what I did wrong, but otherwise, pretty fun class. So now, how did my schedule work remotely? Well, I could really do anything at any time, as everything was due on Friday at 11:59. So I decided that on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, I would do my schoolwork from 9:30 to 12. It worked out extremely well, and actually got most of my work done on these 3 days. Monday and Tuesday would be more of instruction days, and then Wednesday through Friday would be work days. Worked out great. Now let's talk about the next week. So that Monday, August 24th, we actually did something for seminar. This would be that intensive where we normally go to Brevard College, but that got canceled. So for this intensive, we normally would create a trifold on a college in North Carolina that we were assigned to. However, coronavirus messed us up, so instead we had to do a video on our given college. Not only that, but we were also paired up with a couple remote students as well. Each group was assigned a college to do research on and do a video on. Our group was tasked to do Chapel Hill. Each member was also given a job for the group. We had 2 remote students, so they did the research. I wrote the script for pretty obvious reasons. We had another kid be the anchorman, not sure why, and then we had another kid edit because he had an expensive editing software. It was great, we passed it. I should note that seminar is a pass-or-fail course, so we simply passed. Next, I want to talk about getting my license, as it also had a major impact on school as well. So I remember that Thursday, we had an appointment scheduled to get my license. Like all DMVs, this was a pain in the ass, but we got through it. Also, I did not actually have to take the driving test because it was waived due to coronavirus, so all I had to do was show the necessary paperwork and bam, I got my license. As a result, I would now drive myself to school. This would prove to be very convenient later on in the school year. Now let's jump to September of 2020. So to start, I want to talk about an event that happened around mid-September. So if you watched Storytime 10, you would know that I was suicidal in 8th grade. As a result, I was prescribed Zoloft, a medicine made to slow down your nervous system. Since March of 2018, I had been taking this medicine every day. However, sometime in mid-September of 2020, I decided that I no longer needed the medicine. I was doing very well mentally and I thought that it would be a good idea to lay off the medication. Even now I think it was a great idea. The medicine served me well as keeping me happier, but 2.5 years later, it was time to let it go, and so I stopped taking it. I always thought I would have to take it for the rest of my life. Turns out that wasn't the case. It was only for just 2.5 years. I also want to mention the National Honor Society. So this is a club for juniors and seniors if you have a high enough GPA. It's basically Beta Club on crack. Just like Beta Club though, I got an invitation to join the National Honor Society. Normally, there would also be an induction just like Beta Club, but there wasn't this year due to coronavirus. So at times, I often forgot I was even part of this club, but nonetheless, at least I got to show it off on my college application. I still got the certificate saying that I got inducted to this club though. Unlike my Beta Club or Phi Beta Kappa certificate, it's not framed up in my wall. In fact, I don't even know where it's at. But hey, at least I'm in it and I get to put it on my college application. I should also note that I didn't attend any meetings for Beta Club or National Honor Society this year due to coronavirus. Now I want to talk about the first project we had for American history. So this class was very project focused. Of course, all of our classes were project focused because our school follows the expeditionary learning curriculum, but no class screams hands-on learning more clearly than American history. So for this project, we had to do a project on the American dream. We had to write our definition and had to draw some pictures with it on a half sheet of poster board. I didn't mind, I thought it looked good. Dad thought it looked good too. However, my teacher was not very impressed. He asked me to do it again, mainly because the artwork could have been better. I agree. I will admit that even though my art skills are awful, I still could have done better with my limitations. So I did it, and it was definitely better. I think I got an 82 or an 83 on it. While I disagreed with the grade, I was still very happy that I got the redo. Fortunately, this would be the lowest grade I ever got on a project for this class, so it's all good. Next, I want to talk about the workload. You might be thinking that the workload is a lot considering we have so much time on our hands, but that isn't the case. Our workload was actually very little. So little that a lot of the time I didn't have anything to do on Fridays. So most of the time on Fridays, I was just simply on my phone or playing with my cat. By the way, whenever I was doing schoolwork, my cat would run around my room too if he wasn't asleep. Now, after that, September really was not eventful. Let's jump to October, where there would be a little bit more to talk about. So now, I was not the only person in crew anymore. We had a sophomore who just got tired of online school, so we decided to go back in-person learning. We became friends the year before, so we were good. I mostly showed him a bunch of memes during crew. We still could not do normal crew things though, as we didn't have a normal sized class. It was just me and a sophomore. That's it. We would later on have a bigger sized crew. So now, speaking of crew, let's talk about the crew scavenger hunt. So this was on October 13th, I believe. So for this scavenger hunt, we were given different clues and had to take pictures with the solution to the clue. The clues could be things like on stage or by a voting booth. You get the point. We didn't win, mainly because our crew was just too small, but we did get second, and it was still fun nonetheless. Next, I want to talk about the first of 3 very important tests I took this year. All of my final exams were waived this year, so I didn't have to worry about those. However, I did have to take a pre-college entrance exam and 2 college entrance exams this year. The first was the pre-college entrance exam. It was the PSAT, also known as the preliminary SAT. A year before this, I took the pre-ACT at school. I only made a 21 on it. Not that good. Let's take the SAT version of that test. So this was an optional test, but considering I plan on taking both the ACT and the SAT, I did it. We were also provided with Chick-fil-A after the test, so it was worth it. I did very well on the test. I made an 1150 on it. Not bad. That's the average score at UNC Wilmington and Elon, so pretty good. It helped me understand where I was and what I needed to work on. It would especially be helpful when it came time to take the real SAT, which I'll get to later on. I took the PSAT on October 14th, 2020. So then the rest of October really had nothing much going for it. Let's move on to November of 2020. This would prove to be a much more eventful month, but in a bad way. So let's discuss probably what was the worst thing that happened to me in 2020 as a whole. So 2.5 years prior to this incident, I went to Fuge, a church trip. I ended up getting left out on this trip and had a pretty bad experience, but it isn't to say it was completely bad, as it had some good moments. One such would be making a friend up there. So I had a room with 2 others rather than just one, since I was the only boy without a roommate. One of the boys didn't really care. The other felt sorry for me. The boy who felt sorry for me, we later became friends. He was a great person, such a nice guy. And then when I began isolating myself from everyone at church, I still talked to him. However, on November 11th, 2020, he passed away. I'm not going to mention his cause of death, as it would be pretty disrespectful of me, but it hurt me a ton. The only person at church whom I trusted, gone. It was an absolutely horrible experience when I first heard about it. It ended up causing me to start struggling with depression again. This depression would last until the end of April 2021. I won't talk about depression much in this video since it isn't really related to school, but nonetheless, his death devastated me, and needless to say that I was not very happy the next week going back to school. On the brighter side, there was a project for American history, so we talked about the Declaration of Independence. So our project was to basically recite the Declaration of Independence, but put a modern twist on it. We could do things like a text conversation between King George and Thomas Jefferson, a breakup letter, and someone even did a rap. I wrote a breakup letter. The letter wasn't much of a breakup letter though, it was more of an if the Declaration of Independence was written in a 2020 type deal. But it still worked. I read it out to the entire class, as we had to present them. I think I did very well. I noticed my teacher complimented me on my voice. That's definitely a strength I have, as I'm good at speaking up. Of course this is before Storytime, but I was still good at speaking out since I had been doing YouTube for over 4 years at that point. I made 100 on it, which definitely helped that 82 or 83 I made on the American Dream project. So I next want to mention a pretty cool experience we took part in for chemistry. So our chemistry teacher has a lot of friends who are scientists from across the country. These scientists wanted to do a study with some high school students. They had, I believe, 3 experiments. And since they were good friends with my chemistry teacher, they had us to study with. So as stated, these scientists came from across the country. I believe one was from Des Moines, Iowa, another from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, another from I think Buffalo, New York, and then 2 of them were from Los Angeles, California. This was really cool, as we got to talk to the experts about the stuff that we were studying in class. So the way this worked was that they gave us a presentation on what we were doing. Afterwards, they guided us through the experiment, as well as just answered any questions we had. I should note that they did this through the Google Meet between them and my chemistry teacher, since they couldn't travel to Charlotte because of coronavirus. And even without coronavirus, it would still be quite a lot to have them travel across the entire nation for a bunch of high school students. But still really cool in my opinion. So our first experiment we did with the scientists was sometime in late November. So for this experiment, we obtained strawberry DNA. So how this worked was that we had a strawberry. We didn't put that strawberry in a bag. Afterwards, we beat the living shit out of that strawberry. We put it in a bag so the juice wouldn't fly everywhere, as we needed the juice for the experiment. We then put the beat up strawberry on a filter on top of a graduated cylinder. This was so that they could filter all the juice from the strawberry onto the graduated cylinder. Now, I'm not sure what the liquid we used was, but I believe we poured ethanol into the graduated cylinder. This ethanol is important, as it's what exposed the strawberry DNA to us. Then we were given very tiny containers to put the DNA in to bring home. It was really cool and we learned a lot from the experiment. I believe at Crew, I went to the biology lab. Should note we did this experiment in the chemistry lab. Here I got a microscope, which I used to look at the DNA, as our container was transparent. It was really cool. The next day, our chemistry teacher announced that we were going to do a project for this experiment, so she stated that we were going to write a lab report. Nah, she was just playing with us. She actually said this to poke fun at our biology teacher from 10th grade, who had us do many lab reports. Our actual project was an infographic about the experiment. We had to state the procedures and the materials as well as some background information. I don't remember too much from it. I believe I made a 96 on it, as it was a little bit messy, but I still did great and my teacher thought it looked really good overall. Now let's jump to December of 2020. So this month was also quite chaotic. I mean, December is always chaotic, but this month in particular was quite chaotic for me. Let's start off with another experiment we did with the scientists in chemistry in very early December. So for this experiment, we studied bacteria. To do this, we had to get a loaf of very old bread. We were then given a wet paper towel. Then we had to rub our loaf of bread on our table so that it would pick up bacteria. Then we would put the paper towel and the loaf of bread onto a plastic bag and let it sit for a few months. We'd let it sit until March, which I'll obviously explain in March. So let's talk about exams. So all high school final exams were waived this year because of coronavirus. However, I still had a final exam for Spanish because it was a college course. Nothing too memorable about it other than the fact that I made a 90A on it. I texted mom letting her know the grade I made, and her response was a voice message from her student saying, "Nice job, Zach." This made my day. My mom was a second grade school teacher, in case you're wondering. Now, my grade for American history was at stake. I was sitting at an 87, and I needed to get it to an A, so around early December, I mathematically calculated what grade I needed to improve, as I was allowed to redo any assignment other than quizzes, so I decided to redo a DBQ, or document-based question, on how Cabeza de Vaca survived 9 years in the Mexican wilderness. I redid it and brought my grade up to an 89. Now let's talk about the final project for American History 1, the assignment that ultimately determined my grade for this class. So we were talking about the Closing the West. Our project was to do a silhouette of anything related to the theme of Closing the West, and then write an excerpt of a piece of literature from this time period. My silhouette was of a cattle, and my excerpt came from some book by President Theodore Roosevelt I forgot. It was still a success, and I managed to bring my grade up to a 90. Phew, that was close. Fortunately, American History 2 would be a lot easier and I would make a much higher grade in it. Chemistry also went very well, so we did a unit on robotics. We had to do a discussion board on it. However, I mathematically calculated how it would affect my grade, and I found out that I would have a 97 regardless if I did it, so I just didn't do it and got a 0 for it. And my math was correct. My grade stayed at a 97. My teacher actually asked me why I didn't do it, and I just showed her the math. I don't know if I love math too much or if I'm just plain lazy. You tell me. Now we reached Christmas break of 2020. Quite a lot happened during this break actually, so stay with me. So I wanted to first off discuss the origin of Storytime. The reason is because Storytime would affect me quite a lot in the second semester of junior year. So I was still struggling with depression over the death of my friend. Not only that, but I also had to private all of my videos after the new DMCA laws were passed. So one idea I had was Storytime. It's what you are watching right now. These are scripted videos where I talk about different experiences and stories throughout my life, mostly from 2015 to present day. They would be released every Friday. The announcement where I announced Storytime was on Christmas Eve. So therefore, I consider Christmas Eve of 2020 to be the day Storytime was born, and the first Storytime episode was released on January 1st, 2021. This YouTube series would go on to have a major positive impact on me, as we'll explore more later on throughout the rest of the video. So Christmas this year was a bit unusual, as normally we had our family come over. That didn't happen thanks to COVID, so it was just me, my sister, both of my grandmothers, and my parents. So around early November, I wrote my Christmas list. I think I only asked for like $200 worth of stuff. Our budget was $600 for me and my sister each. However, what mom and dad didn't tell us was that because me and my sister made all A's, they were going to extend our Christmas budget. So instead of $600, it was $1,000. I asked for an iPhone 7 on my list. What did I get? I got an iPhone XR. I was completely blown away by this, but I guess hard work pays off. My sister also got an XR, even though she only asked for an 8. So we're very thankful for my parents for making Christmas really awesome and going above and beyond our request. These phones would really be useful for the next day, so the next day, me, my sister, and my dad got up and drove to Delaware to visit family. It's an 8-hour drive, so having my new phone with me that had an incredible battery life was great. Not only that, but we also stopped very little. I believe the only stop we made was in Central Virginia. I spent most of my time looking and stealing memes. Our stay also went very well. Mom did not go, mostly because she wouldn't have any to talk to, as my uncle's wife passed away about 8 years ago. Then when I got back from the trip, it was December 29th, 2020. Then December 31st, we stayed up all night and watched the ball drop to end one absolutely gruesome bullshit-filled year. 2020 is no more, thank God. But 2021 honestly isn't much of an improvement, but Storytime at least makes it better, as well as a few other events too. Now let's move on to the second semester. So I now have a new schedule. My first class of the day was chemistry, second was seminar, then crew, then American History 2, then American Lit, and then a study hall for Mondays and trigonometry on Tuesdays. So let's talk about the new classes. So first off, I want to discuss American History 2. In the first semester, we talked about American history from Christopher Columbus to Reconstruction after the Civil War. For American History 2, we talked about closing the West all the way to the presidency of Barack Obama. There was also much more work for American History 2, but interestingly, I found American History 2 easier than American History 1, and my grade will show that. I now want to talk about American Lit, or 11th grade English. So this was taught by my freshman English teacher, my crew teacher. I was in great terms with her since the end of freshman year, so this class was much easier than when I had her as a freshman, and it was also just for a semester too. Now, as most of you know, math is my favorite subject, and best subject. Consequently, English is my worst and least favorite subject, but surprisingly, I actually enjoyed this class. Yeah, I enjoyed an English class. That's rare. Next, I want to talk about trigonometry. Now, this is a college class, not a high school class, so I plan on going for an Associate in Science. The difference between an Associate in Science and Arts is that in Arts, the highest math class you need to take is Pre-Calc. I took Pre-Calc as a sophomore. However, trigonometry is also needed for science. I plan on studying mathematics in college, so an Associate in Science would be best for me. Plus, I didn't want to have to take 2 humanities classes, as you only need one of those for an Associate in Science. I probably confused the shit out of you, so to make it simple, I'm going for an Associate in Science. To get it, I have to take a higher level math class. That's why I'm taking trigonometry. Generally, it's only seniors who have to take this class. However, I took this as a junior because I didn't know it then, but I was going to get much farther ahead over everyone else, which I'll explain in a bit. Now about trigonometry itself, this class was really fun. There was quite a lot of homework for this class, but the homework was fun too, simply because I loved math and wasn't rushed to do it like I was in 8th grade. So this class would be the moment when having my own vehicle would become useful too. It already was very useful, but this class made it all the more useful. So often, our professor would let us out early, like very early. Sometimes she would let us out at like 30 minutes early. So having my own truck with me definitely helped out a lot. Next, I want to talk about Spanish again. This is Spanish 2. Now, Spanish 1, while forgettable, was very fun. Spanish 2, though, would be the exact opposite. I had to take Spanish 2 completely online because I was taking trigonometry. However, this is by far one of the most boring classes I think I ever took. It didn't help that the work was very excessive, and it felt like there were a billion assignments in each module, as we were assigned far more work in Spanish 2 than in Spanish 1. I still did very well, but it was still a pain in the ass to do the work for the class, which normally I have a lot of fun doing schoolwork because I love learning. Next, let's talk about Introduction to Ethics. Now, this is the philosophy class. It went over multiple philosophical issues like abortion, feeding the hungry, environmental ethics, animal rights, that kind of shit. This was mostly that class that I would forget about and realize, wait, ethics? Oh yeah, that class. So not a very memorable class. I do remember that my professor took ages to grade stuff. Like my first paper written in early February was not graded until late March. Yeah, he needs to step up his game. Next, I want to mention January 4th, 2021, the first day of the second semester. So this was a very rough day. I had to let the front office know that I was driving my dad's Honda instead of my truck, as my truck was at the garage because its steering fluid leaked. Then I ended up having to leave at 1:15. Why is that bad? Well, I had to go to a dentist appointment that day. I hate the dentist. It's boring, and I'm just like, why? No cavities though, so that's good. Next, I want to talk about how I'm feeling. So around this time, I felt like depression was getting better. Storytime was definitely helping a lot, as I found a new hobby in writing. Definitely unusual that math is my favorite subject and then writing is my second favorite, but oh well. Of course depression still existed, but Storytime definitely calmed it down a lot. Next, I want to mention the final experiment that we did with the scientist in chemistry in, I believe, mid-January. This was not the last time we heard from them, though, as we would eventually hear from them again in March. But we're in January right now, so let's stay there. So this experiment was very similar to the one we did in early December. We were experimenting with bacteria. So for this experiment, we were each given a petri dish. We had to split our petri dish into 4 equal sections. Then we had to rub a stick on 4 different surfaces, which is why we split our petri dish into 4 different sections. We got to choose which surface we wanted to rub our stick on. I chose my phone, a sink, my table, and a doorknob. We were then would let them sit until March, as the bacteria was going to grow. Once again, I'll explain more about that when we get to March. So now, I want to talk about English. So during this time, we were reading a book called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. Basically, Pausch was a computer professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had an amazing life. He had a great job, a great personality, a great wife, great kids, great everything. Unfortunately, he finds out that he has pancreatic cancer and only has 8 months to live at only 47 years old. So he did a last lecture on all the stories and lessons he learned throughout his life. It's really sad, but it's also a really great read, so I definitely recommend it. Anyways, for this book, we had to answer questions from the packet. These questions were not exactly about the book itself, though. They were more about our personal experiences, as the point of the book was for you to relate to what Pausch is saying and applying it to your own life. This is actually really fun to do. It also is very easy, as I got Storytime thing for that. In fact, for some questions, I literally copy and pasted quotes from Storytime. So that's another way Storytime has impacted me positively. Not only that, but Storytime has helped me answer personal questions much easier, but it also had the opposite effect too. This assignment actually helped inspire Storytimes as well. It really helped me answer questions about my life, which is kind of what I do on Storytime, so this was like the perfect assignment for me. Next, let's discuss a project for American History 2. So American History 2 started with closing the West. Yeah, we were still talking about it even in a new class. So our first project for this class would be a big one, just like American History 1 with the American Dream. So our project was to create a Closing the West mural. This is where we had to include 10 topics from the unit all into one image. Stuff like Mormons, cattle ranching, cowboys, moving out west, Texas, that stuff. However, we could not include any words on it, which is what in my opinion made this difficult, as I simply could not write Texas on a sign and call it a day. So as a result, I just scrapped the Texas idea. It also had to be on a full sheet of poster board, and I also had to scrap in another idea where I would cut the board into a shape of the United States. Not only that, but it would just be too difficult to do. So instead of using a full poster board, I included 10 elements on there, including cattle, a wagon, Mormons traveling to Utah, the Transcontinental Railroad, the Indian Wars, and more. I worked very hard on this. I believe I spent about 6.5 hours on it. Why? I liked it, so I put more time into it. I ended up making a 94 on it, which I'm very satisfied with, especially considering my terrible art skills. I also did this project in just one day on January 21st, a Thursday. Now I want to backtrack a little bit to early December of 2020. Starting around this time, about every other Friday, me and my sister would drive to my grandmother's who lives in Asheville. She's the person who gave me my grandfather's truck, by the way. So about every other Friday, we would begin going over there. It's always very fun going up there. However, let's jump to January 22nd, 2021. So that night before, my sister's leg hurt. Her leg still hurt that morning. As a result, she had to be taken to the doctor, and they found out that she had scratched the bone of her leg. So as a result, I drove up to my grandmother's house alone that day. Let's just say, this day was absolutely amazing. So if you know my psychology, you know that sometimes I wake up happy, and other days I wake up sad. This day was the day I woke up happy. So at around 10 o'clock, I headed on out. Now, I enjoy driving by myself, and driving by myself for an hour felt absolutely amazing. In fact, the drive up there and back is also amazing. The best part about it, though, was that I think I only spotted like 3 cars on the interstate, as this was not a very busy interstate. This is the main reason I loved this drive so much. Not only that, but it was actually quite warm that day, typical North Carolina weather, so I drove about 80 miles an hour blasting music with my window down. This is to say that I was very happy driving up there. We went to a pizza place when we got there. Afterwards, I drove back home and enjoyed it just as much as the drive up. Then my sister got back home, and she was also about to leave to go to a friend's house. Pretty unusual to do that when your leg is in a boot, but oh well. I drove her to my friend's house, which is about 45 minutes away in the opposite direction as my grandmother's. So I drove her, and then I cruised back home by myself. I also stopped to get some takeout for dinner, as well as because life was just so good that day. Dad offered to pay for it when I texted him where I was going, but I declined and used my own money instead, just because I was that happy. So January 22nd, 2021. Absolutely awesome day. It honestly felt like a reward because the day before that, I did my Closing the West mural, which I worked very hard on. Once again, hard work pays off. So now that hell of a day is over with, let's talk about my friends' response to Storytime. So my friends knew I had a YouTube channel and they knew what I posted. They've known since we were freshmen. Even back when I went by Reggie248, they knew about it. So Storytime was and still is my favorite series I've ever done on YouTube. And it seems like my classmates agree. They love Storytime too, as they got to experience many of the things mentioned with me. Ryan and Robbie, two friends from middle school who don't go to early college, also really like Storytime, as I talk about middle school a lot. So this positive response from everyone at school motivated me to start taking Storytime much more seriously and making my videos longer, which I did. I had 4 Storytimes at this time. The longest was 7,800 words long, being Storytime 2. The second longest was Storytime 1, only clocking in at about 2,500 words, so I began writing longer scripts and getting more serious about Storytime. This not only positively impacted my classmates, but also positively impacted me, as I began loving writing more and more. Now I consider writing to be my second favorite subject, only behind math. I also got better and better at it too. Now, before I wrap up January, I want to talk about Seminar. Remember the college video that we made? Well, now we had another thing for Seminar. Instead of lasting from August to September of 2020, it lasted from January all the way to May. So sometime around mid-January, we were supposed to go to the Biltmore house for an intensive. However, because of coronavirus, we were unable to do this trip. It really sucked, but oh well. So instead, we had to do a personal finance class. This class was made by Dave Ramsey. What's funny is that this was also during the time that Dave Ramsey was getting sued, so a little bit ironic. But basically, we talked about saving, budgeting, debt, that kind of shit. Pretty straightforward stuff. Kinda baffles me that so few adults know how to do these things, as it just sounds so elementary. But oh well, as an American, I can confirm that yes, Americans are indeed stupid. Now let's jump to February 2021. So for the most part, this month in general was pretty uneventful. We finished the last lecture near the end of February, and we talked about history, and we talked about chemistry and chemistry. But it isn't to say this was completely uneventful, as I actually took the second of the 3 very, very important tests, the ACT. So all juniors have to take the ACT for some reason. It's provided us for free, so I guess that's good. So we actually passed the personal finance course, the stuff. We paused it in the personal finance stuff in Seminar so that we could study for the ACT. We did multiple practice tests as well as got our sophomore English teacher and our sophomore math teacher. Not the one that got arrested, obviously. The one that took his spot. They went over the test and I think it really helped us understand. Another thing too is that I had the reputation of being an absolute god at math. The whole class knew that I was probably the best math student among us. So if the math teacher was not available, students were actually ordered to talk to me. I really liked this. It also kind of gave me some bragging rights, as I could brag about being the best at math among the entire group. I was not, however, that good at doing math quickly, as I'm good at slow, complicated trigonometry. The ACT, though, could care less that I knew how to use Heron's formula. They only cared about how fast I could do it, as the ACT is a time cruncher. That's why the ACT was actually a bit useless for me, as I would go on to take a different test that did test how good I was at math and not by how fast I could do it. Now let's talk about the day of the ACT, being Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. So school was out that day for all students except the juniors, because obviously we were taking a massive test. This test might determine where we went to college, so we needed to concentrate. So my experience with the test was a little bit strange. I was very hyped up for this test and excited about the English and math sections. But then we reached the reading and science sections. The reading was just boring, and the science was on crack. Another thing I want to mention is that the main reason I prefer the SAT over the ACT is because the SAT doesn't have a science section. That's why. Because what kind of drugs were the test makers smoking? Charts and graphs? 40 questions in 35 minutes? You've got to be kidding me. The reason it's charts and graphs and not actual science knowledge is because this is meant for the entire country. Different states require different science classes. In North Carolina, we're required to take Earth Environmental Science. In Virginia, that's not required. In California, physics is required. Physics is not required in either North Carolina or Virginia. So that's why I decided to drug the shit out of the science section with charts and graphs and not like actual science questions. But overall, I did very well. The average ACT score is an 18. My pre-ACT score in sophomore year is a 21. My ACT score, I made a 24. That was actually a lot higher than I thought I was going to make. I thought I was not going to improve for my pre-ACT, but I was wrong. I made a 26 on math, 24 on grammar, and 22 on both reading and science. Science is what really impressed me. To be honest, I thought I was going to make a 17 on science, but no, I did better than I thought, so I did very well on the ACT. Ultimately though, this test would really just be a waste of my time, as I'd take a different test and blow it out of the water in March. Now I want to go back to chemistry. So around late February to early March, we got to do an interview with different scientists from all over the world. I should note that these scientists are not the same scientists that we did the experiments with. These are different scientists. We talked to 5 total scientists. We talked to one in Hong Kong, one in Raleigh, North Carolina, one in Canada, one in Spain, and one in Japan. It was really interesting and overall really cool experience. So now I want to discuss college. So college was for the most part completely virtual throughout the first semester. Of course, Spanish was in person, but Spanish actually took place in the early college building, so that's the only exception. However, in early February, we finally went back to in-person learning. The only class I took in person was trigonometry. So this meant that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would go to trigonometry from 2:30 to 3:45. I was at school on Tuesdays, so I'd simply walk across the campus to get there. Then on Thursdays, I would actually have to drive myself over there just to attend that class. But nonetheless, I still love this class and enjoyed it a lot. Next, I want to mention my attitude toward, actually no, I've already talked about that. Now let's go to March of 2021. This was a very eventful month, so be prepared. And I should note that April and May, especially May, are really eventful months, so be prepared. So I first want to talk about Storytime. On March 5th, I released Storytime 10. It was on my 8th grade school year. This was the longest script and video I ever wrote for Storytime. The video was an hour and 36 minutes long, and the script was 19,863 words on 43 pages. I knew it was going to be this big, so I actually started writing the script even before I wrote the script for Storytime 8. The reason it was so big was because I had to talk about being suicidal as well as the worst day of my life. This would be the longest Storytime I ever uploaded for about 12 weeks, as this Storytime that you are watching right now is actually the longest Storytime I have ever done. It overtook Storytime 10's record. The script is over 24,000 words on 56 pages. So remember the experiments that we did with the scientists in chemistry? Well, now is the time that we look back on our bread and petri dishes, and holy shit, these were dirty. Like, my bread turned green. As for my petri dishes, I noticed a ton of bacteria on the section from my sink. Surprisingly, a lot of that came from my phone as well. We talked with the scientists about these. We also said goodbye to the scientists, as they now had all the data they needed to write their report. Overall, teaming up with these scientists was really cool, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Now I want to talk about a project for American history too. So we had just finished talking about World War I. So our project was with our group. We had to create a podcast on any topic from World War I. I was in a group with 2 girls. These girls were probably the students who came up to me the most for help on the math section during the ACT prep, since both of them were English students, while I'm of course a math student. So I knew them a bit. We chose our topic to be on trench warfare, as it's probably the most important aspect of World War I. We did have a little bit of a dispute on what time we could record. Us 3 went to different churches, but we all had church on Wednesdays at the same time, so we had to do it that Thursday. However, I had trigonometry on Thursday, so we couldn't do it that afternoon. The girls generally didn't work that well at night, unlike me who actually works best at night. So we ultimately did Thursday at 4:30. Our podcast was successful. It was cringy, but it did the job. Another thing too was editing. So originally, I was going to edit. However, I couldn't do it, as that Saturday, I was going to be taking a major test. So I needed a rest that Friday. The girls knew nothing about editing. Fortunately, our teacher gave us some mercy and actually got the technology guy at our school to do the editing. So that put a massive weight off our chests. But there was still one massive weight on me. So that major test would be the third and final extremely important test I want to talk about. This would ultimately be the reason why the ACT was a waste of time. This is the SAT. So the SAT, unlike the ACT, was not sponsored by the school. I actually signed up and paid money to take the SAT. I also did not have all the resources like I did with the ACT. However, even then, I still did even better on it than the ACT, which I'll get to in a minute. So I am very thankful that the school let us take the PSAT back in October, as it came to be very helpful for the SAT in March. However, one thing I noticed was that the PSAT was actually quite different from the SAT. The SAT gives you more time and more questions than the PSAT. There's also an extra section on the SAT that could be a random selection from any of the 4 given topics on the SAT. The SAT, however, is completely different than the ACT, so the ACT was a complete time crunch, as I ran out of time on both the reading and science sections. The SAT gave you a lot of time on each section. On every section, not only did I have enough time to complete each section, but I was also given time to review my answers. Another thing too is that the SAT has 4 sections just like the SAT, or ACT, but they're completely different. There is the reading section, the grammar section, the calculator inactive section, and the calculator active section, as well as the 5th section, which is the random one. The reading and grammar would be combined for the English score, and the 2 math sections would be combined for the math score. This meant that there was no science section. Thank God. I hated that bullshit on the ACT. None of that here. One final thing too is that the SAT is more focused on critical thinking, something I'm good at. I'm better at taking my time to figure out something, so therefore the SAT was the perfect test for me. So I took the SAT on March 13th, 2021. I had to wake up pretty early, which bugged me a lot. I think that I might have done better had I done this at night, but oh well. And just like the mask, I don't make up the rules, so I had to deal with it. So the SAT experience went very well. I felt very comfortable about it. I also felt comfortable knowing that I really didn't have to do all that well on the test, as my ACT score was already great. And should note that I did not get bored on the SAT. I did get bored on the ACT. I think I told y'all before, but I didn't get bored on the SAT. However, I blew my SAT out of the water. I managed to make a 1280 on it. I was extremely impressed by this. I remember that when I saw my score, I had to clean my glasses and refresh my computer because I thought it was a glitch. But no, I genuinely did that well on it. Apparently, that's the top 10% in the country. I was in the top 5% in math and top 15% in reading. I'm not surprised about the math though, but the reading really shocked me a lot considering that reading is my worst subject, so I was satisfied. What made me all the more satisfied was comparing this to my parents. My dad made a 1200 when he took it back in 1989, I believe, and my mom made, I believe, just a little bit lower than he did. So it was pretty predictable I'd do great just like my parents did 32 years later, which I did. I scored almost 100 points higher than my parents. Therefore, whenever my mom brings that she's smarter than me because she's got her master's degree, I can bring up SAT scores. Now let's jump to just 2 days later, March 15th. So this day, our high school and college counselor was doing senior registrations for all juniors. So now you could basically classify us as rising seniors. They talked to each student and their parents that one-on-one in deciding their schedule for senior year. Definitely a good idea, as we now would know what we were taking the next school year. So I was special in this meeting. One of my counselors decided that I would be the last student. The reason is because we looked through what classes I needed in order to graduate, and I think there were only 4 classes total that I needed, and then only 2 high school classes, being British Lit and Civics. Most students still had like 8 more classes to do, so I was very far ahead. The reason I got ahead was because of 2 reasons. The first was because of taking high school courses in 8th grade. I mentioned these classes were rough at times, and I felt like they weren't going to help me that much. However, now, I realized that taking these classes was a great idea, as now I was very far ahead. Another thing is taking these classes over summer. So while I tried to, I was not allowed to take summer classes in 2019, as rising sophomores are just not allowed to take them for whatever reason. So in the summer of 2020, I did. I already talked about them. For summer 2021, I was going to take General Physics 1 for the first 4 weeks, General Physics 2 for the last 4 weeks, and then College Transfer Success for the whole summer. And also, I want to update that a little. So I ended up dropping physics. It was just too difficult for me. It was online. The professor was an asshole, so I just dropped the class. I'll be taking Biology 1 and Biology 2. I'll be taking Biology 1 the first 8 weeks of fall, and in the second 8 weeks, I'll be taking Biology 2. So I'm still going to be graduating this December. So at this meeting, my counselors then made a proposal. I could graduate early. They asked both me and my dad if we wanted to do that, as my mom did not attend this meeting. Both me and dad decided to follow through. So yep, I'm graduating with both my high school and college degree in December of 2021. This was very exciting, but also stressful, as now sending out college applications was coming much sooner than expected. So now I want to talk about how my schedule for senior year is going to work. So normally, you only take 1 high school course in senior year, but because I'm graduating early, I'm taking both British Lit and Civics in the fall. Then for college, I'll be taking 2 college classes, being Research and Development and Marketing, as well as Biology. This means that this December, I'll be graduating with my high school diploma, associate's degree in science, and a business and administration certificate. It's common for someone out of school to graduate with their associates in arts early, unusual for someone to graduate with their associates in science early, but very rarely does someone graduate with an associate's in science and a certificate early, so I'm definitely really happy about this. But there are some concerns with it too. One would be Storytime. So prior to this, I made a Storytime planner. I of course was not expecting to graduate early when I created this planner, so I plan on doing a Storytime on senior year around the same time I'm doing this Storytime. So I had to make some rearrangements, meaning I'll be discussing senior semester on December 3rd. Or December 17th, 2021. This script was written like a month ago, so there's a few errors on here because it's not really up to date. I'm actually going to be doing the senior year story time on December 17th, 2021. So be prepared for that. I also decided that I'll only upload one story time in January, being 2021 year review, and afterwards, there won't be one until February. Of course, this was no big deal, but it did kind of mess up with plans. The main concern, though, was relating to college. We were expecting to start applying this fall. However, because I'm now going to be applying for spring rather than fall, I had to start applying this August. Yeah, pretty scary, but we'll get through it. I can adapt to change. That's why I conquered the age of coronavirus, so I could conquer this as well. So that's that. Oh, and you bet there are going to be a lot of story times relating to finish up high school in December, by the way. So be prepared. Now, finally, I want to mention a project for chemistry. So this project was the elemental superhero villain. We had to create a hero or villain that was related to an element. We also had to include information on them, such as their backstory, as well as a Bohr model of our element. I chose to do francium, which is my favorite element. I also decided to do a villain. My villain was named Jean de Francium. Jean was a French scientist who lived in Kazakhstan and worked for the Soviet Union in the 40s and 50s. He studied francium because of its radioactivity, or reactivity, not radioactivity. He wanted to find a way to blow up the United States with the francium bomb. He also wore an eye patch after some francium accidentally exploded while studying near the Caspian Sea. This overall was a very fun project to do. I made 100 on it, mostly because my teacher loved the historical references throughout the poster. Next, I want to talk about English. So we finally finished the last lecture. Now we were going to read The Great Gatsby. So we actually were talking about the 1920s in American history, and we actually mentioned The Great Gatsby in American history, as this book is a very vital when discussing 1920s culture. So we had somewhat an idea of the backstory. So this book was probably one of the most confusing pieces of literature I think I ever read. But when I say confusing, I mean that in a good way. That's kind of the charm of this book. It's confusing, and as a result, it was challenging. That actually made this book a really good read, as I often had to read the chapters more than once in order to understand what it was saying. In fact, that chapter where Nick and Jordan go to Gatsby's first party, I think I read that chapter like 5 damn times. Yeah, it was that confusing, but I still managed to understand it after reading those 5 times. Now let's jump to about a week later, on March 23rd. So this was going to be the day that I was going to take the driving test in order to get my restrictions removed on my license. However, unfortunately, I couldn't take the test. The reason was because before that, we had to take an eye test. I had terrible vision, even with my glasses on. So as a result, I failed the eye test and ultimately did not get my restrictions removed. I didn't go to school that day, so I mostly spent the day laying around playing with my cat. And also, probably in July, I'm probably going to go back. I have to go to the optometrist. And more likely they're going to get me a new prescription because my glasses right now really suck. Like, my prescription is like, I can't see far away. Like, not only that, but I'm taking off my glasses right now. I can barely read the script. Like, my computer is just a foot away from me and I can barely read it. So, like, with my glasses I can read it, but like, I mean, if it's like, let's say 4 feet away, I can't read it. So therefore, I'm going to have to get a new prescription. But anyways, before I wrap up March, I want to talk about a thing for crew. Whoa, what's that? I know y'all ain't stupid. Let's get into it. So this assignment the school wanted us to do for crew was, in my opinion, not a very good assignment. So each crew was assigned a black historical leader who had a major impact on African American history. Why? Black History Month. Only problem? They came up with this in March. Black History Month was in February, so already a pretty unplanned event. So basically, this assignment we had to do was that we had to do a TikTok on a prominent person who had a major impact on African American history. The TikTok had to have like 10 facts on the person. There also had to be acting to go along with it. Yeah, the school was literally asking us to make fools of ourselves. The issue? Only 2 people in our crew, and neither of us knew how to use a TikTok. So same case with most crews, as most crews didn't have anyone who knew how to use TikTok. The school still had us do it. I think they should have just waited till next February, mostly since I'll conveniently have been gone by then, and they can actually do it during Black History Month, as well as because they can actually teach us how to do a talk tick or whatever the hell you call it. So for our crew, we were assigned Michael Jordan. However, we never actually finished this TikTok. The reason was because our teacher was not there for a few days, then I was not there on the 23rd, so we decided to just not do it. The school allowed our crew to waive it, as we could not get it done before spring break. We did watch the other crew's TikToks though, and holy shit they were cringy. But oh well, at least we didn't have to do one. Now we reached spring break. Spring break lasted from April 2nd to April 9th. Now, spring break was overall very forgettable. I do remember one night staying up to like 4:30 writing a story time. Dad actually got kind of mad over this, as when he woke up for work, he saw me in the office typing away. But he couldn't get that mad. After all, I was on spring break. He wasn't, so I won there. And I believe that was Storytime 15 that I was writing at like 4:30 in the morning. That was on my 7th grade school year, so y'all can check that out. I felt like that was a pretty good one. It's probably one of my favorite story times ever. By the way, like it's so funny. So y'all should watch it. Now, before I talk about school after spring break, I want to talk about a major decision our county decided to do. So our county decided that after spring break, we would go back to school 4 days a week for 2 weeks, and then we would go back 5 days a week starting the week of April 26th. Going back full-time had a lot of major changes. First off, all the students from Cohort B were going to join us. I have a lot of friends from Cohort B, so it worked out great. Another change was crew. We were now finally going to do stuff in crew. Now, we actually had crew, as there was a lot more of us. Our crew increased from just 2 of us to about 9 of us. I think like 4 freshmen, 4 sophomores, and then only 1 junior, being me. So now we actually did stuff, although I disagree with how some of the stuff was laid out, which I'll get to later. Our final change would be the last day of school. So for me, the last day of school was going to be May 25th, since I was Cohort A and only went to school on Mondays and Tuesdays. However, now that I was going back full time, it would be May 28th. But then I'd later find out that the real last day of school for me, which would be a lot sooner than both of these days. I'll talk about that in a bit. So now let's talk about April 12th, 2021, our first day back. So this day was very strange, obviously, but at the same time, it felt like things were getting back to normal, which they were, so that's good. We did not do seminars though, as instead we did an extended crew since both cohorts were coming back together. In this extended crew, we did a crew race. Not like the scavenger hunt from back in October, no, a race between each crew. Normally, our crew comes up on top. However, at this race, we came in second to last. It mainly was because the event was pretty poorly planned out, and overall, literally every crew was at the same station at the same time. I think this event could have been much more enjoyable had there been more stations to spread out each crew, and that would also have made it more competitive. But I mean, it's not really a big deal. It's just to have fun and welcome everyone back. Now let's talk about the environment of crew now. So now, crew felt quite normal. We did, however, have to still eat lunch in crew, but overall, it felt normal. What I want. Now I mentioned that there were about 9 people in our crew. 4 freshmen, 4 sophomores, and then me, the junior. So me and the freshmen were generally pretty quiet. But the sophomores, though, oh god, they were crazy. Whenever the teacher was not in there, they'd be doing the craziest shit. Ask a freshman, they'll agree with me. I'm actually kind of surprised it wasn't the freshmen who acted all crazy, as that's generally a freshman thing to do. But oh well, I guess we could consider those sophomores second-year freshmen or something. Another thing I want to mention is workload. So around this time, we began getting a lot more work than we normally did throughout the year. But I mean, sure, it made sense since we were back full time, but still kind of sucked, as I actually plan on doing 2 story times a week, but I guess that ain't happening since I have a lot more schoolwork. Now let's talk about English again. So now that we finished reading The Great Gatsby, we were reading The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's a very violent and pretty graphic book about the Vietnam War. I recommend it only if you can handle gruesome stories. It was definitely a lot easier than The Great Gatsby, so I'm pretty happy that we were reading something easier. But it was still a great book. Now let's go back to chemistry. So we had a new project. It was a group project too. So we had to we just got done talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. For me, it was more of a review since I learned about this in 6th grade. So for our project, we had to create a 3D model of any given labels of the electromagnetic spectrum. It also had to include information about the spectrum, information on the level we chose, including frequency, wavelength, etc. We chose to do microwaves, so pretty glaringly, we made a microwave. We also put the information on fries and that we cut out from yellow sheets of paper. We also included a menu with information about the electromagnetic spectrum. While it didn't make much sense with the menu and the fries, it still worked out and looked extremely good. But what I remember most from that is that we actually finished a week early. Most other groups had just started, but we were ahead of our game, so we finished it a week early. So for the next week, we just simply added stuff and just went to other groups with our friends to talk to them. So how did I contribute to this project? Well, I didn't put the microwave together. I was actually in charge of the information. Since I was the smart guy in the group, I was tasked with gathering the information. I also was tasked to find the measurements for the microwaves. So after spending about 5 minutes on Wikipedia and doing some elementary geometry, I was able to not only gather all the information on microwaves and the electromagnetic spectrum that we needed, but I also provided the measurements for the microwave. That's all I was tasked to do, as the group now knows that not only am I terrible at arts, but I was also jack shit at crafts. So it made sense that I gathered and synthesized the information, as the information was a little bit complicated to understand. We ultimately made 100, as it just went really well and all the required materials were on the project. Now I want to talk a little bit about dismissal. So on Mondays, I had a study hall since I did not have trigonometry on Mondays. I originally thought that since we were going back full time, that I would have the study hall 3 times a week. However, that's not what happened. Instead, I actually would not have a study hall on Mondays and Wednesdays. On Fridays, I still had it though. Instead, on Mondays and Wednesdays, I would get off at 2:30 rather than 3:45. I'm very glad they let me do this, as study hall at the end of the day was kind of pointless. It's in the morning on Fridays, though, so that's why I can't be released early on Fridays. But nonetheless, I was still happy with it. This also meant that on Mondays and Wednesdays, instead of my grandmother picking my sister up from school, I would. Her school was about maybe 15 minutes away from mine. She also got out at 3, giving me plenty of time to drive and pick her up from school. Now I want to mention April 16th, 2021. So this was going to be our first Friday back, however, I was gone that day. So my sister cheered for a competitive cheer team unrelated to school. They had a competition in Gatlinburg, Tennessee that weekend. Gatlinburg is about 4 hours away from Charlotte, so we had some plans over there, and we also had some plans over there for that Friday night. As a result, we skipped school that day. We spent the weekend there, and we drove back home on Sunday, April 18th. Surprisingly, I actually enjoyed myself there. I didn't even see my sister's performance, which was the part that I dreaded. I got to eat a lot while up there, and I walked a lot. While driving there, though, we did get in a little bit of traffic while near Asheville, which made this trip there about 5 hours long. But nonetheless, I enjoyed myself. I remember that before we headed on out, I actually wished that I was the driver, as the drive is absolutely amazing, but that mood changed when we hit a city called Hendersonville, which is literally like 15 minutes away from Asheville. Like, Dad had a very hard time trying to get over because of how crowded it was, so I'm pretty happy that I wasn't driving. Instead, I just laid there either looking out the window or playing Clash Royale. That would not be the only eventful weekend though. Literally just the next weekend, on April 24th, our church hosted an event called D Now. I won't talk about it much since I already did an entire Storytime on it. It's Storytime 18 if you'd like to see it. But all I'm going to say is that I had a lot of fun and it was a blast. It also marked the end of depression. So the week after D Now, we had quite a lot going on for crew. So since we were now almost back to normal, we could do normal crew stuff now. I was, however, a little bit critical of how the transition worked. It seemed like we were just getting back entirely without really anything in between. It honestly felt like everything we did the teachers came up with mid-air. I felt like there should have been more planning in regards to crew for the last month. But I mean, once again, I don't make decisions for crew, the teachers do, so I didn't get much of a say. One thing we did as a crew in particular was the group Goldberg machine, so I talked about this on Storytime 11. It's basically where we had to make something perform a task in such an overly complicated and excessive way. I criticized this project in that video for feeling useless and just out there, and in my opinion, it was even worse this year. I felt like that now the teachers knew that they only had 1 month left of school, and so they just wanted to get everything for crew done, including the Rope Goldberg machine, without having us learn the expeditionary learning curriculum, which honestly should have just been the last thing done. It was rushed, but I mean, I really can't complain too much. I'm at least happy that crew was back and that we were getting back to normal. Another thing in crew that we did was an interview with the person who discovered the Titanic. Forgot his name, all I know is that he lived in San Diego and he was a little bit out there. When I say out there, I mean he did a little bit of crazy talk. He literally said that we were all going to die and that no other planet's going to provide us home unless we start doing something. So basically he said that we're all going to die and that home is our only Earth. I love how Elon Musk is probably proving him wrong right now. A student then asked him what that something was, and he was speechless. You could tell this guy was out there. He sounded like he was on meth or something. But outside of this, it was definitely interesting getting to hear from the guy who discovered the Titanic back in 1985 or something, I forgot. Which, I mean, that could have been better had he not been talking about we're all gonna die and stuff. He should have just stayed on topic about him discovering the Titanic and he should have just kept the topic on the Titanic, not talking about we're all gonna die. This ain't philosophy. This is literally discovery. So the rest of April was uneventful. Now let's talk about May. May is going to be the month that I talk about most about in the story time. The reason is because I began writing the script for this video on May 1st. Therefore, instead of looking back at past events, all that I write for the month of May is actually written on the day that it occurred. So this month is going to be kind of like a journal. So let's get started. May 4th was a rather interesting day, so when I woke up that morning, it was cloudy. I didn't think much of it, so I just wore a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. However, this all completely changed the afternoon when a thunderstorm hit. This was not some pushover thunderstorm though. No, there were tornado warnings in the county surrounding us. Not just that, but it was raining incredibly hard. Fortunately, we did not have any tornado warnings in our county, only a watch. However, this was extremely problematic for me. Obviously, I was not prepared for this weather, but the worst part is that I had trigonometry, which was across the campus. I did not want to have to walk half a mile in the middle of a tornado watch, so I simply walked to my truck, which is only about maybe 40 feet away from the front office. But before I went to trigonometry, literally the second I stepped outside of my English teacher's room, the power went off. Everything just went pitch black. Me and my teacher got our phone's flashlight feature on. All students except me were required to stay in their classrooms. But because I was going to trigonometry, I was allowed to stay in the hallway. The power went back on after about 10 seconds, but definitely a little bit strange. But the crazy part was getting to trigonometry. So as stated earlier, my truck was parked about 400 feet away from the front office. It was raining extremely heavily, so I just ran to my truck as fast as I could while a billion cuss words came out of my mouth. Yet, even doing so, I was still completely soaking wet. It looked like I had just jumped into a pool with my normal clothes on. My wallet and my phone were also soaking wet. I have a waterproof case on my phone, so it did not get damaged. My wallet also did not get damaged. I mean, I honestly was not expecting anything to happen to my wallet. Like, I once put it in a washing machine by accident, and while soaked, it was completely fine. Anyways, I was soaked, so I turned the heat up in my truck all the way. Even then, I was very wet and very cold. I didn't park right by the building trigonometry took place. Even then, I still had about 250 feet to cover. So just like before, I pulled a Forrest Gump and ran as fast as possible to the building. I ended up getting even more soaked and wet. I did not, however, put my phone in my wallet. I put my phone in my wallet and my book bag, which I think was a good decision. So the worst part about that was that I had a test that day in Trig. Our professor allowed us one note card on each test, and 4 note cards on the final. This was not the final, so it was just one note card. But I was very worried that despite being in my book bag, that my note card I wrote that night before might have gotten wet. Fortunately, the only thing that got wet was me. So while still problematic, as this test was on paper and pencil, it was at least a better experience. So before I began the test, I actually went to the bathroom. There, I wiped my arms and with literally as many paper towels as possible, as obviously I was not expecting to go for a swim before this test. I managed to dry my arms completely, as well as some of my hair, which is really all that I needed to be dried. During the test though, I dried some more, so by the time I finished this test, I was dry. So now I was finished with the test. I could go back home. I thought that I would have to do another Forrest Gump, but fortunately, I did not. When I finished the test, the thunderstorm stopped. It was still cloudy and damp, but overall, it actually felt quite serene. So despite all that struggle, I managed to make a 97 on this test. Yeah, despite still having a note card, I honestly was expecting a C, but instead, I made almost a perfect score. Thank God. So now that those shenanigans are all the way, let's jump back to American history. So during this time, we were talking about the 1960s. We discussed different things like the Civil Rights Movement, the space race, the Vietnam War, etc. So we were assigned a project for this. We were required to create a 1960s album. We had to include 10 songs about any of the topics during this time period of the topics. We could do our topics on the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, the space race, Vietnam War, and other topics that I can't remember. We also could work in groups. I chose to work with my friend Logan on this. We did the Cold War as a whole. This gave us a much longer time period to work on than we only, let's say, Vietnam. I believe we included songs like Moscow and Back in the USSR. We also included the Soviet Union anthem, as there is no Cold War album without the Soviet Union anthem. And plus, communism is funny. Originally, me and Logan thought that this would be a very difficult project. Turns out, it was actually pretty easy. We worked together on picking out the songs. We also worked together on writing descriptions. Logan drew the front cover of the album, and I colored it. It worked out really well and overall successful. We only made an 89 on it, but it was still successful, and both me and Logan enjoyed this project. Now I want to talk about 2 projects for English, both of them being related to the things they carried, which is what we just finished. So first off, I want to discuss a solo project. For this project, we were required to write our own book on the style of how Tim O'Brien wrote the things they carried. For most students, this was torture. For me, this was an absolute blast to make. It had to be based on our experiences, which made this project all the better because I had been doing that with Storytime for 5 months now. I chose to do my book based on my swimming career, mostly because on why I quit. I chose to do swimming because when I was writing this book, I was actually working on Storytime 19, which is my redo of video of Storytime 8. I had a lot of fun writing this, simply because I just enjoyed writing in general. So this is a great project that I'm really glad I got to do. The other project was a group project. So for this project, we had to create a Yaya box on any character from the book. You're probably sitting there wondering what in the hell a Yaya box is. It's basically a box that represents a character from any given book or story. The outside of the box represents them on the outside as a person, and the inside represents them on the inside. Definitely a really cool idea for a project. We actually did a Yaya box in freshman year after we read a book called The Joy Luck Club. And by the way, if you're wondering why I didn't include that in Storytime 2, well, I kind of forgot. I might redo that Storytime one day, and I'll be sure to include it since I forgot it. Anyways, back to 11th grade. Our Yaya box also went very well. Our character of choice was Jimmy Cross. He was basically the leader of the platoon. He also had a crush named Martha, and she wrote him letters while he was in Vietnam. So the way this project worked was that we had our one group member bring the materials, 2 painted, I wrote their letters since I'm the best writer out of all of them, and then 1 burnt my paper. The burning was a reference to when Cross burned Martha's letter after a member in his platoon was killed, by the way. It was very successful, and it looks stunning. This was actually our final for the class. We normally would have done a test on the things they carried, but our teacher let us have the option to do the Yaya box. So we did the Yaya box instead, simply because it's much more enjoyable to talk about in Storytime than a test, and because it was easier to do in general. Next, I want to mention a change in schedule regarding the last week of school. So our school decided to make the final week of school a remote week, except those with EOCs. Us juniors did not have any EOCs this year. Our final exam was also waived, so therefore, our last day was Friday, May 21st. However, EOCs were not waived, meaning that freshmen and sophomores still had to go to school the next week because they had to take EOCs. So after this announcement, this meant that instead of today being my last day of school, my last day would actually be the 21st, why I chose to make Storytime on junior year today rather than the next week on June 4th. So next, I want to mention how I'm doing mentally. As mentioned before, I am no longer depressed. However, I was still very stressed out. Our teachers thought that since there were only 3 weeks left of school, that they were going to cram schoolwork up our asses. In fact, just the entire month of May in general has become very chaotic. Of course, well, it's not May anymore, it's June. But, yeah, I literally was talking about why May is still chaotic, but yeah, May was a very chaotic month, so June has been a lot less stressful. May was very chaotic because not only did I have school, and then I had to take physics. Physics stressed me out, and then I dropped out of physics, and now I'm no longer stressed out because I'm not taking physics, so. But yeah, I'm not stressed out at all now. So first off, I want to talk about 2 experiments we did in chemistry, and then I want to talk about a project for them. So for the first experiment we did was on Thursday, May 6th. In this experiment, we experimented with calcium chloride and baking soda in water. We were required to take qualitative data. Qualitative data is based on your 5 senses, being touch, taste, sight, smell, and hear. Of course, we could not taste the experiment, as that would be dangerous. We did get to touch and see, so that'll work. We then had to write our observations down on a sticky note. We did this in groups. Our group had a pretty fun time doing this experiment. We did 3 trials. The first trial is where we had to mix baking soda in water. The second trial is where we had to mix calcium chloride in water. Then in the third trial, we mixed baking soda, calcium chloride, and water all together. In the first trial, the bag that held the baking soda and water felt very cold. In the second trial, the bag felt very hot. In the final trial, our bag exploded and a white sticky water spewed all over our table. Our table was black, so it made this stick out even more. Now, I actually knew what was going to happen to the bag in the third trial, so therefore, I warned my group that they should not hold on to the bag when doing the procedures for the trial. The reason I knew this was because I actually did this experiment in 8th grade. So when I did this experiment 3 years ago, I was in a group with 2 others, I forgot, and a class clown. So this class clown got a little cocky, and he started shaking the bag hard. Like, this dude might as well have thrown his bag into a tornado. But then, after about 5 seconds of shaking, the bag exploded in his hand. He had the white sticky liquid all over him. Don't worry though, he had goggles on. It was really funny what had happened, but I didn't want it to happen to anyone else. So therefore, we played this trial safely. Now the next day, being Friday, May 7th, we did another experiment. It was very similar to the calcium chloride experiment from the day before, but this time we were going to take quantitative data. Quantitative data is data recorded through numbers. This would include things like temperature or pH over time. So we unfortunately did not do trial 3 from the first experiment again, but we did do the first 2 experiments again. Only this time, we used a thermometer and pH tablets, as well as a stopwatch. For each trial, we timed each trial for, I believe, 7.5 minutes. We noticed that in the first trial, the solution began at room temperature, but then at around 5 seconds in, the solution just shot down in temperature. I believe it was like 35 degrees at this point now. We recorded the temperature every 5 seconds, then it very slowly rose up. For the second trial, the opposite occurred. 5 seconds into the trial, and the solution's temperature soars. Like, I think the solution maybe hit 130 degrees. Yeah, it was insane. And I've got to say, this experiment perfectly illustrates the weather here in North Carolina. I should also note that we did not do this second experiment in 8th grade. So now to wrap up the experiment, we had a project on it with our group. Our project was to synthesize all the quantitative and qualitative data onto an 8.5 by 11 inch cardboard stock paper. We were all given a week to do it, as it was due on Friday, May 14th. We finished this on Wednesday, May 12th. It wasn't that hard. All we had to do was basically jot down the procedures, the qualitative data, and the quantitative data, and we're good. One of the members actually did the writing, another member created the table and graph. I formatted that table and graph correctly, as well as traced the paper, as well as just edit the writing in general. It was a success. Next, I want to discuss the end of college for the school year. So college classes ended on May 11th. So that Monday night, being May 10th, I finished up all my work for Spanish. While unfortunately, Spanish was not as enjoyable as it was the first semester, I still did very well. I took the final that Monday night, and I made a 90 on it. I made a 94 in the class. Next, I want to talk about ethics. So as mentioned earlier, ethics was overall a pretty forgettable class. However, I did very well in this class, coming out with a 97. In fact, I literally missed an assignment in February and consequently got a 0, and I still made a high A. Well, considering everything I did was 100, made sense. Other than the fact that my professor took 15 years to grade my stuff, I enjoyed this class. Finally, I want to wrap up trigonometry. So this class, in my opinion, ties with quantitative literacy, which I took in the fall of 2019, world civilizations, and business law, which both of those I took in the summer of 2020, as my favorite college course I've ever taken. I love this class. I mean, I love math. I want to be a mathematician. Of course, I enjoy this class. So the final for this class was very strange. It was split into 2 parts, a multiple choice online test worth 60% of our final grade, and then a written test worth about 40% of our grade. Well, not our final grade, our final exam. I did the multiple choice final on Saturday, May 8th. I made a 97 on it, missing only 1 question. I do know why I got it wrong though. I was asked to find the area of the triangle. I did not divide by half. I noticed this around mid-test and got pretty upset that I could not go back. But it's the only question I missed, so not too big of a deal. Now for the written exam, which I took in class on May 11th. So before I discuss this test, I want to talk about my mood. So I was in a great mood. A couple of students, as well as my English teacher, wished me good luck on this test when I was leaving, as they all knew that, yeah, this is a pretty serious test. Not only that, but the receptionist wished me good luck when I was walking outside the school to go to trigonometry. This really reminded me a lot of how I was treated in 8th grade by my new second block after getting discharged from a mental hospital. I felt like people really cared about me, so I was in an awesome mood going into this test. Some of these students are probably watching this video right now, since my whole school knows about my YouTube channel. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell y'all that I did extremely well in this test because of y'all. Thank y'all. So I think the reason I got a lot of good luck on this test was because this class is often considered to be the hardest class early college students generally take. I mean, I could somewhat agree with that, as it is pretty difficult to take. It's pretty difficult for the most part. For me, this whole class is a breeze though. So for me personally, that would go to probably physics. But yeah, this is a difficult class if you don't know what you're doing. So once again, thank y'all for the good lucks. I really needed them. Now for the actual test. So this test was 11 questions long. However, our professor only graded 10 questions, so if we got one wrong, we didn't have to worry. Now, coming into this test, I was confident about it. I knew all the formulas, knew my special right triangles, knew how to graph, knew how to convert from radians to degrees, like I was ready. However, there were 2 questions I knew that could really kick my ass on this test. If I was asked to graph if I was asked to graph a tangent curve, or if I was given an ambiguous case question that involved two triangles. There were no tangent curves, unfortunately. However, there was an ambiguous case problem involving two triangles. If you remember that test that I came in soaking wet in, that test was about law of sines, ambiguous case, law of cosines, and Heron's formula. I made a 97 on it. I missed only one question, and that question was the only two triangle question on that test. I knew that I would be screwed, so when I saw this, I got really scared. However, for whatever reason, my brain just decided to go beast mode or some shit like that. Like, I was not even thinking. My hands seemed to move writing down each step perfectly while doing this. So perfectly that I ultimately got this question right. You know, I'm kind of known for having stupid moments. Like, I once submitted an American history assignment for chemistry on an accident back in February. But this day, for whatever reason, I decided to use the full capacity of my brain so that I demolished this test. Pretty clearly that I made 100. So combined from being in a great mood from all the good lucks I got to my brain just being a smartass, I managed to make 100 on this. Yeah, absolutely insane. It's just like my final for pre-calc I took a year before this one. Except for it, I spent like 6 hours on it. This test I only spent 45 minutes on, and yet I made an even higher grade than I made on the final for trigonometry than my final for pre-calc, which I believe I made a 97 on. Of course, that also kind of has to do with trigonometry simply being my best and favorite math topic in general, so that's probably why. Wow, that's a lot for just one test. But we're not all done with college courses for the school year. Of course, this summer I'm taking college transfer success, and then of course I dropped out of physics. So I've still got some college courses for senior year as well as the summer. But for junior year, I'm done. So let's talk about an essay for English. So if you watched my Storytime on freshman year, which was Storytime 2 by the way, you know about the infamous essays we had to write for English. Well, despite taking American Lit under the same English teacher, we never had any essays for all semester long. However, this is when that pattern ends. So since we had just finished reading the things I carried, we had to write an essay on the things we carry. These could be like physical or emotional things. All three of my things I listed were physical, but they had emotional weight. I chose a $1 bill my grandfather signed before he died, a letter by my sister who wrote to me while I was in the hospital, and the paper-mache Dorito I made in 8th grade. So the point of this essay was for us to actually make this essay so good that we submit it to college applications. More than likely, I probably will not use this essay. I mean, it's good, but like I was severely limited in my writing style, as a teacher was grading this. In fact, in college admissions, while it will need to be professional, it's only going to have their rules, not my English teacher's specific rules. So therefore, I'll do another one. It's no big deal. I love writing anyways, and Storytime made me really good at writing about my life, so it's a good idea. Now let's jump to the next day, being Wednesday, May 12th. So this day was overall uneventful, but two things happened. First is my final grades for my college courses. For ethics, I made a 97, for trigonometry, a 95, and for Spanish, a 94. Now the other eventful thing was for chemistry. So on this day, when we were given time to finish up a project, we did an experiment where we made soap. So this experiment was really weird, as we kind of put styrofoam cups in a microwave, which is a big no-no. It was only for 15 seconds, but it still wasn't a good idea. One girl in our class actually burnt her cup in the microwave after she put it in for 25 seconds. I only did my cup for 15. And our teacher actually said put it in for 30, so I don't know what she was thinking, but you don't put styrofoam in there. So you're probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Well, as stated, we were making soap, so I can't remember all the details, but I do remember each of us getting 4 soap solids, if that's what you want to call them. There were different types of solids, by the way. We put them in a styrofoam cup. We then added some coconut oil to the cup. Afterwards, we put our cups in the microwave for 30 seconds. Yeah, for some reason, our chemistry teacher thought it was okay to put styrofoam in the microwave. But to be honest, it really was not that bad. Of course that girl burned her cup, but that's all that happened. I only put mine in for 15 seconds, and it worked out great. Afterwards, we put some dye on our new liquid soap. I believe I did red, blue, and white. I got pink from this. Therefore, I decided to call this my Barbie, since it was pink, and of course Barbies are always come pink. It was successful, and I had a bar of soap now. But the memorable part about this experiment, though, would come at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, we got to go back to chemistry to get our soap and take it home. However, someone in our teacher's second class, the class that she had going on at this moment, had spilt dye. Like, they literally dropped the dye bottle and it broke, spilling dye across the floor. While there was not much dye in the bottle, there was a lot of scent. The entire room got a very odd smell. We could smell it from our mask. I'd say the best smell to compare this to would be it smelled like the doctor's office. It smelled really bad. Our chemistry teacher then wrote on the whiteboard, "Rip floor." However, our English teacher then came in for whatever reason and said that it smelled great. So that was a little bit strange. So now Thursday was not very memorable. How about we discuss Friday, May 14th? So I want to remind you all about the thing that we were doing in crew for being the Rube Goldberg. So this was when the Rube Goldberg was due. However, our crew, I said never finished it. We actually did finish it. We finished it late though. We finished it that Monday. But the reason that we were late was due to inadequate instruction. Now, I was the leader in this, as I was obviously the only junior, so I had to take up the leadership role. So therefore, I kind of came up with many of the ideas, and of course, I did all the math. So in freshman and sophomore year, we did our Rube Goldbergs in crew teacher's room. Therefore, that's where we set up. So we started setting up that Monday. We brought in all the materials. I also did all the mathematical calculations on the board to tell my crew how long the rope should be and how far apart different things should be. I think I might have impressed my crew. There was this one freshman girl in particular who came up to me wondering how in the hell I did all this math. I almost laughed when she asked this, as all I did was use the Pythagorean theorem, which is something you generally learn in 8th grade. But turns out these calculations were useless. On Thursday, our teacher told us that we had to set up in the biology lab the day before the thing was due. You've got to be freaking kidding me. Literally every other crew except us and one other had theirs set up in the teacher's room. I did all that math and already cut out everything, but no, though it was all for a waste. Why? There's literally no point. Not only that, but we also had to scrap our idea. So our plan was for a basket to fall down. Not only that, but I also had to scrap all the math I already did. I get she's an English teacher, but like, come on. Even you should know that there are always different numbers in math. So we tried to come up with ideas in the lab after we tore down our stuff. We ultimately decided to make a much simpler idea. We would have a golf ball hit some books, and then have those books hit a wheel, and then we would hit dominoes and would pop up a flag. Easy enough, right? Well, on Friday, we learned that even more information that our teacher failed to tell us. We found out that there had to be a specific ending to the Rube Goldberg, where you had to make a bottle of hand sanitizer squirt. Not only that, but the machine had to be 10 steps. We had no idea we had to do this, and it was the day it was due. Not just that, but our teacher was not at school that day, so it's safe to say that we were screwed. But that's not to say that we at least didn't try. This is why, despite this project overall being stressful, it still was successful. I still think it was successful. We tried our best. Us failing, when us having to rush this was completely out of our reach. We could not do anything about it, but we still tried and get a working Rube Goldberg on Friday. We came very, very close, but we were unsuccessful. We fortunately would complete it on Monday. So what's funny about this whole thing is that our teacher was supposed to have us watch a video about this, but she never showed any of this. She then said that she emailed it to us. However, I didn't receive an email, and neither did the rest of my crew. So therefore, I conclude that our teacher should be the one who takes the blame for this whole thing. Now I want to discuss a project for American history. It would be our final project for American history, and honestly, thank God. While I enjoyed the projects we were assigned, we got quite a lot of them, and sometimes it got pretty excessive. But this was our last one, but it was an individual or group or even class project. No, it was a project worked by the entire junior class. Yeah, you bet that this is going to be massive, and sure enough, it was. So this project was to make a giant mural of 2020. These things could range from stuff such as coronavirus, Muslim camps in China, World War III, Beirut explosion in Lebanon, Australian fires, and more. So our leader for this project was an artistic girl, not the one that I worked with on my children's book in 10th grade with, a different one. I'd say that she was a great leader. I think she did an excellent job at dividing everyone into different groups. So her plan was to create a giant earth, meaning a giant circle with a circumference of about 12 feet. Yeah, this thing was going to be massive. Then, on the earth, a rectangle would be placed over it. This would be a mask. We would then put out all the topics onto the mask, just to split us into different groups, and that we do what we wanted. So I was in a group with 3 other friends. We were tasked to do World War III, more specifically, bombing Iran at the beginning of 2020. So for our group, we drew the United States with the flag inside of it and sent a bomb to Iran, which also had its flag inside. We then drew an explosion on Iran to represent us taking out General Soleimani. It worked out really well. It was simple, but it established the point in a very easy fashion, and you could tell what we were talking about in the picture. So we put it on the mask. We also had one member draw it. The other 2 members colored it. I was basically their leader. I made sure everything was right. I also came up with the idea. I also gave my members constructive criticism to make sure that this looked great as it could be. And overall, it was successful. The end product, though, was not just a success. It was a masterpiece. Despite things such as World War III being vastly different from things like Among Us or Israel peace treaties, it still felt like they were all in one picture, exactly what a mural was supposed to do. It perfectly portrayed all the hell that broke loose in 2020. This project really demonstrated what happens when all of us came together to create something and how it worked out so well. A little bit unusual that we did this project in May rather than January or February, but it makes sense why. In the beginning of the year, we could not do things such as this because we were split between different cohorts. Now that we were together, we could do it, and it was time. Now let's talk about Monday, May 17th, the final Monday. So this day, oh my god, this day was super chaotic, but at the same time, this would be when much of the stress mentioned throughout the month of May was released. So let's start off with chemistry. So this class is what really set the stage for what was about to happen. So every Monday, our teacher does a thing called Monday Circle. In this circle, we basically talk about how we're doing. It really helps us get pumped on Monday, although we kind of were already pumped since it was after all the last week of school. She got this idea from our sophomore biology teacher, who also did Monday Circle every day until coronavirus kind of screwed that up. So this circle was a little interesting. So one girl in our class was venting about our English teacher. She complained about how much work she gave us and how vague her instructions were. This vent then escalated into a rant. Fortunately, our chemistry teacher stopped it before it could get even crazier. Afterwards, we played Quiz It Live for the rest of the class. But then at English, shit just went from 0 to 100 in the first 30 minutes of class. So this was the day that our book was due. I finished my book on Friday, so I was ready to turn in. Same goes with most others in the class. However, there were 4 who didn't turn in anything. One of those was a boy who I believe had like a 48 in the class. So our English teacher takes him outside to give him what we like to call her rough. She gave me this rough about every day in 9th grade. Same goes with this boy, although unlike me, he never really improved. While she was out there, that girl who ran in chemistry started ranting again. Then, after talking to this boy, she walks back in while this girl was in the middle of her rant. Our teacher asked her what she's talking about. Instead of saying something random like nothing, she just continued her rant, but this time ranting to the teacher. Now, talking about teachers you don't like is okay. I mean, I do that pretty often here on Storytime, but when you do it in front of your teacher, that's in my opinion taking it too far, as I think it's not only rude, but it's also very childish. If you want to give your teacher constructive criticism, that's perfectly fine. I do that a lot. In fact, we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit. But when you go as far as this girl, yeah, it's not a good idea. So let's talk about the situation. So to really understand this whole conflict, you need to know some background information on this girl and what we were doing in class. I've already talked about what we were doing in class. 3 projects as well as the Rube Goldberg if you count crew. Although that only includes me since I'm the only junior in our crew. So this girl did not do her work. Now, the reason she didn't do her work was because she said that she had to work until 9 and wake up at 6. Which, I mean, I understand. It can be quite difficult to do her work. She complained that I was excessive and too much. That's why she didn't do it. There are a couple issues with her argument, though, that my teacher pointed out. One was that in seminar, we were given the last 45 minutes to do schoolwork. I literally did my book in a week in a seminar, and I wrote 5 chapters. We only had to write 3. Another argument that our teacher had was that we did it. And also another thing, I'll get to that later. Another argument that our teacher had is that we had the Yaya box in class. We never took it home. Therefore, if she got off at 9, she didn't have to worry about working on it. Finally, we were given a lot of time to work on these projects. While I understand that the essay only had a week, we still had seminar to do it in. Not just that, but for the book, we were given like 5 weeks to do, although in reality it was only 2 since we had to read the book first. This girl also complained about our questions we had to do for our book. Now, I'm with her on these questions, as I felt like they were very excessive. Our teacher said that it took her 30 minutes to do the questions. I don't think that this is very accurate, as she's the one who wrote the questions. For me, it generally took about 2 hours to do them. And remember, English is my worst subject. We had 3 of these, but even then I think that she could have got her work done, even with her circumstances. 45 minutes a day in seminar could give her time to get her questions done by Wednesday, and then on Thursdays and Fridays, she could do her book. Really simple. Now, you might be wondering, Zach, what about other classes? The problem with that is that we didn't have work from other classes to be done outside of school. We did all of our work for chemistry and American history in class. College was also done, so really no excuse. So this really divided on the class on whose side we picked. I think most of the class is on the girl's side. For me, while I agree with some of her points, and I think that the girl does have a valid argument on some cases, I side with my teacher, as she's given so much time to do her work. I also noticed that most of the time, this girl was either on her phone or she was talking to friends during seminar, so her arguments are not valid at all. Not just that, but we have students who work as long as her. In fact, we have one student who works even longer, and he still does his work, so really, no excuse. But then after some talk between the two, this girl just completely destroys her credibility by basically freaking the hell out. They had one conversation about a book that she had to read to make up for make up work that she didn't do. She complains about how the teacher was never specific on when to get the book. She ranted about this earlier in chemistry, when I was on her side. With all respect to my English teacher, I think that if she were to assign a book, she must be able to provide all necessary materials to do the assignment the day it was assigned. But the full story is that our teacher actually told her that not only was it online, but it was also on their shelf. The girl then loses her shit and continuously yells, "Where's the book?" in a pretty demonic tone. This would be when she was kicked out of class as well as sent home. I think she might have just been able to be having a panic attack, but afterwards it started a pretty big debate in class. And I should know that I was also pretty impressed with my English teacher and how she handled this. I'd say that my teacher handled this extremely well. Like, she was completely calm throughout the whole thing. So, very big props to my English teacher for that. Like, in situations like that, it is very difficult to stay calm. And the fact that she was able to stay calm during that, while a student was literally shouting at her, that's impressive. Our teacher then came back into the room and apologized for the whole incident. She didn't ask us if what she said was true. Many students sided with her. I decided to take a center approach instead of siding with the teacher like I did earlier. I believe that no teacher is perfect. There's always one thing that every teacher struggles with, but there's also something that every teacher excels at. One thing I think that my English teacher struggles with is pretty obvious: instructions. The reason she gave us vague instructions is because we're juniors and she expects us to know what to make. However, while I agree with her explanation, I think that she is at times too vague with instructions. Like our book, she never specified what we were about to write about. Were we supposed to write about Vietnam or our life experiences? Now, she also said that she expected us to ask questions. This is what pulled me from a centrist to more kind of on her side, although still closer to the center. I agree with it. Most of us are graduating in 1 year, or in my case, 6 months. But answering questions is what she really excels at. I asked her quite a lot of questions when reading The Great Gatsby. As mentioned before, that book was confusing. Her answers were always so helpful and helped me understand the book better. That's what she's great at, but I think that she should have at least made it so that she will think we won't need questions, and then if we did, we could ask her. She also should encourage us to ask more questions. We were all asked to give her constructive criticism, and that was my criticism. I should also note that unlike the girl from earlier, I made sure to stay as respectful as possible and actually talk what she was good at and what she needed to improve on. I also, of course, was making a 98 in her class, so I think that my teacher definitely accepted more from me. I think she took this constructive criticism, and as a result, she will probably become a better teacher when we're gone. This is what I hope happens. I did this the early college way. Our school life's great, but we heavily emphasize on better. That's what I hope happens with my teacher. So why did I bring this up, other than the fact that the girl freaked out, which never happens? Well, the reason is because this debate really brought me back to freshman year. The arguments I had with my teacher as a freshman kind of relate to the situation the girl was in. I was able to put myself in her shoes and understand what was happening. Sure, was she as excessive? Yes. But did I understand where she was coming from? Of course I did. Another thing too is that shit like this never happened at our school. Everyone who comes to our school comes because they wanted to, not because the government forced them to. We had to apply to go here. So you bet quite a lot of us are here to learn and are ready to work. We don't complain much and don't have much drama. This girl, though, was kind of the opposite. There was also kind of her demonic begging voice, which also never really happened. Which didn't happen normally. That happened, it just isn't normal. So that's kind of the significance of the whole drama. Wow, that was a lot. How about we go back earlier in the day to seminar? So I have seminar with my American history teacher. I think I've already mentioned earlier. So also, as mentioned before, our teacher was very lively and overall a really fun teacher to have. So since he was a fun teacher, why not turn him into a fun president? I was talking about this to a friend, and he agreed. Well, then we got the whole class to run home for president in the future, as our teacher is not yet 35. He'll be 35 by 2024, so he can run then. We decided that his vice president will be our school's 10th grade English teacher before the one we had. As remember, he actually left. Well, I don't think I've told you all this, but he left the school after our freshman year after he got his doctorate. We then were going to have our current sophomore English teacher be the press secretary. We were going to appoint our freshman and current English teacher as Chief Justice. We also would have one of our students be the head of the FBI, as that's actually what he wants to do one day. It was fun. It didn't spread around, and our teacher overheard it. He was on board with it. He also picked me to be the head of the Department of Defense. We decided that as president, he will make it illegal to say America, as you must say, America, just like how he says it. We also were going to put up a whiteboard in the Oval Office filled with really dumb and stupid quotes. So basically, our teacher has a whiteboard in the back of his room filled with dumb and funny quotes said throughout this class. Some examples include, them countries, like Africa, Hitler was born in Australia, and from Virginia to America. Good stuff, so why not put it in the Oval Office? Half of these quotes will probably come from the news alone. We also decided that as president, he will make it the law that everyone is required to have at least one voice crack a day, since he's known for his voice cracks. I try to have a voice crack, but I'm not my history teacher. I can't do voice cracks. If y'all heard him, he's the best at voice cracks. So now let's actually talk about American history, as a prank was played. But I didn't play a prank on my teacher. No, he played a prank on me. So we had just finished talking about the presidency of Bill Clinton. So we did an inquiry on NATO after the Cold War. Of course, it was not on Monica Lewinsky, as that would have been way too entertaining for a bunch of 17-year-olds. So we talked about times NATO was involved in 6 scenarios. Only problem, there were only 5. So each table was given 1 or 2 scenarios. My table was only given 1. Every other table was given 2. We were assigned scenario 3. We didn't split into different tables to talk about what we got. So we were heavily confused when I had nothing for scenario 4. I then asked the teacher about scenario 4. He then says that I should have done it, and it was on our table. So I went back to my table to find it. Turns out, we didn't have scenario 4. In fact, nobody did. Scenario 4 did not exist. I realized after seeing him laugh to death after walking back to my group, he told me that it didn't exist and it was a prank. I found the prank pretty funny, and he did after all get me good. I didn't threaten to bomb the hell out of Yugoslavia. What I actually meant by this was that I was going to pull a June 28th, 1914, if you know what I mean. Now let's move on to the next day, Tuesday, May 18th. So chemistry had nothing going for it. Let's talk about American history again. So in this class, we discussed the presidency of George W. Bush, as well as the whole 9/11 attacks and how we started a war in Afghanistan. We also talked about the Iraq resolution, where we basically decided to invade Iraq and take out Saddam Hussein. So to help us understand this, we did an inquiry on it. However, our teacher gave us all 3 at the same time, but the first 2 were laid face down, as we weren't supposed to do them until after we did the first one. And we were all doing them together. We could not get ahead. But one student got ahead and decided to try to do them. Our teacher noticed this and snatched his paper. He then tore it apart and taped it on the quote wall. We then referred to this as a piece of art. This was so funny. This kid got a new sheet of paper, and I think he learned his lesson. Oh well, we were only on the first one, so no big deal. But yes, what a beautiful piece of art. Just a paper written in 4 sections. That was really funny. So let's talk about English a bit. So this would be the due date for our books, although I turned mine in the day before. So for those who turned in our books early, our teacher actually read them that night. She said that she was extremely impressed with ours, but then she said that she was especially impressed with mine. Of course, everyone knows that I was probably the best writer in the class, so pretty unsurprising that I got the shout out, but still really cool. I also remember one kid talking to the teacher, and he said that I was a phenomenal writer, as he peer reviewed my book, and of course he also watches Storytime, and I've actually shown him a couple of my Storytime scripts, so I've always thought I was a great writer, especially since I began Storytime, but I guess now that I have proved I'm a great writer, as other people think too. In English, we also began ACT prep. Now, earlier in this video, I talked about taking the ACT. This is more for those trying to retake the test. Of course, for me, this prep was a little bit useless, as I'm not submitting my ACT score, and I don't plan on retaking my SATs since I made a 1280 on it. So I guess I just did that because why not? Might as well feel nostalgic for like 3 months. Now let's move on to the next day, being Wednesday, May 19th. So that morning for chemistry, we had a final. Wait just a minute. I thought there wasn't a final because that got canceled. Well, yeah, but our teacher decided to give us a cumulative quiz she made herself. We had to do it by Friday, but we were given time in class to do it Wednesday. I did it that Thursday night. I made a 95 on it. Therefore, I spent most of the class this day on my phone. Now let's move on to crew. So for this day for crew, we worked on some project I forgot. However, I didn't work on it. Instead, I was helping my English teacher out with some cornhole project she's working on. She knows I'm great at math, so therefore she paired me up with this freshman who was also great at math, and we helped our teacher out. We needed to put some tape on the cornhole thingy or whatever you call it. So the freshman taped it, and I did all the math to determine how much tape should be used, as well as a logo for near the bottom that our teacher wants us. It worked out great, and I think our teacher did a pretty huge favor. And I should note that the reason I did all the math was because this involved trigonometry. The freshman that I worked with, she obviously, her highest math was Math 3. She had just finished Math 3, so she had just finished all of her high school. So therefore, a lot of this had to deal with law of sines, which is like trigonometry stuff that I learned. So therefore, I was the one who took in charge of the math. Now let's discuss American history again. So on this day, we had our notebook checked. Since April, when we got back full-time, we had a notebook and had to manage it all. However, to do notebook checks, our teacher had us check each other's. The one I checked was, while in order, had quite a lot of incomplete and missing work. For me, the only issues were that I missed 2 things, so I got a 90. However, remember the whole Scenario 4 prank that my teacher pulled on me? Well, he still hasn't gotten over it, which I can understand, as I thought it was a pretty funny prank too. However, when we reached that paper, which was an assignment in our notebook, our teacher then said, "It's okay if you don't have Scenario 4. Unless you're Baynard, then you must have Scenario 4 done." I laughed quite a bit at this, and so did the rest of the class. More than likely, everyone in my class is going to be asking me about Scenario 4 all the way until I graduate this December. I don't mind though, it's pretty funny, and my teacher really got me good, so... But what's funny about this was that the person doing my notebook check actually almost counted that. Then my teacher says, "Oh, they were ready, Zach." I laughed even more at this, although on the inside, my mind was going, "Bitch, if you mark that incomplete, I am going to start a communist revolution, and you're going to be Tsar Alexander." Still really funny, though. Now let's talk about the second to last day of school, being Thursday, May 20th. So this is a very humorous, but surprisingly eventful day. So first, I want to talk about chemistry. So we did a video conference with a chemist in Hickory, North Carolina. She basically showcased a bunch of different experiments relating to removing carbon dioxide in different things. Probably the most memorable one from this video conference was where she removed all the carbon dioxide in an empty Diet Coke can and using a Bunsen burner. She then very quickly put the hot can in some ice water in a beaker. What happened? The beaker exploded. It was really funny, but really cool. So then in seminar, our teachers gathered all of us together to do the Junior Dundee Awards. These were basically funny stuff, like most likely to blow up something in the lab or most likely to accidentally go to India instead of Indiana. Every junior won an award. I won the award for most likely to get his hands on some illegal francium. So as you could probably tell, francium is my favorite element. I like francium because it's the most reactive element on the periodic table. My chemistry teacher knew this, as I've used francium in many projects such as the Elemental Villain project from one back in March. So therefore, I'm definitely the most likely to get francium. My friend Lucas got the award for most likely to go through a drive-thru backwards, which actually did happen. So back in October, he and a couple friends went to Bojangles. They of course went through the drive-thru, however, Lucas went through it backwards. He literally started at the window. It was crowded too, so they literally had to get people to stop going around so that they could turn around. This story spread pretty rapidly throughout the school, mostly because Lucas just told everyone. Our teachers heard it too, so of course Lucas got this award. Now, after we finished the Dundee Awards, everyone was then asked to share a story from junior year. I shared 2 stories, both of which I discussed this story time. My first story was how I got to trigonometry during a thunderstorm with rain and rain just pouncing down. The other story was about Scenario 4. Really funny story times, and both of them really brought up some conversation. Next up was crew. So this day was a surprise. So our crew did an event for crew where everyone got to participate in at least one activity and that stuff. There were different activities we could do to earn points for our crew. The activity I participated in particular, was where you had to bounce a ping pong onto a cup. Each cup had a label of how many points it was worth. There were some worth 5 points, one was even worth 10, and one was worth -5. We were given 2 ping pongs. My first one missed, but then I predicted that the wind was blowing west at a speed of 2 miles an hour. So therefore, by using simple trigonometry, I determined that I should throw my ball at a 30-degree angle. I did that and managed to hit a 5-point cup. We were the first crew to go, but there were plenty of other crews who also went. I ended up being the only one of 2 people who landed a ball in a cup. The other one landed the ball in a cup, but it was a -5 cup, so his crew ended up getting last for that event. So the final results for the event were that crew got last, everyone else tied for second, and then my crew won. Definitely really cool that I managed to be the reason why our crew won. We got quite a lot of high fives and stuff. Now let's give over to American history, as nothing happened in it, so let's talk about English. So in English, we finished up our ACT packet, and then our teacher announced to the class that we had officially finished American Lit. Just like we did when we were freshmen, we burst out into applause. Our teacher also joined us in the applause, and remember, this is the same teacher we had for 9th grade English, so I'm guessing it was just tradition that we do this with her, but definitely a great moment, really reminded me of freshman year. And now for the day we've all been waiting for, the last day of school, May 21st, 2021. So pretty obvious that this day was going to be very abnormal. I mean, it's the last day of school. Of course it's going to be unusual. So let's start off with chemistry. So in chemistry, we made a cake in a coffee mug. So how it worked was that we brought a coffee mug from home to class. Then we put, I believe, 3 tablespoons of cake mix, 2 tablespoons of water, and then we heat the suspension up in the microwave for 1 minute. See, I did learn useful stuff in chemistry. We could choose between 3 different types of cake mix. I chose fanfetti, as I'm pretty picky with chocolate cake, and I hate strawberry cake. But overall, the cake was surprisingly good. It was super simple, but it tasted really good. It did taste a little bit like coffee, even though I got this mug out of the dishwasher. But overall, the cake was great. Now, remember that project I did for English for my English teacher with that freshman? Well, my teacher needed one more board. The freshman was in class, so therefore, I worked on this alone. It was really fun. I got to use a couple things I learned from trigonometry to apply to this project. More specifically, the law of sines. All I had to do was tape, as my teacher was going to paint. She just needed me to do all the calculations. She knows how precise I am. I finished it, and that was that. Now for the last class of the day. Well, not a class. It's the junior award ceremony. So this award ceremony went well. I didn't earn any awards, but it was still fun seeing my friends get awards and just celebrating the end of the school year. The award ceremony ended at 11, and if we had a verbal permission, we could leave at 11 rather than 2:30. So I called my dad asking him if he could give me permission, and he agreed, so I left school that day at 11 o'clock. When I got home, Dad was also at home. He decided to work at home that day, and I think he chose the perfect day to work from home. We decided to celebrate finishing up my last full year of school, so we got Zaxby's. So that's what we did. We ate Zaxby's. So now I want to backtrack to that Wednesday. So our college applied to receive money to give out to students, and they got it. Therefore, every student with at least a 2.0 GPA got $200. My GPA is 3.7, so therefore I got $200. So that Friday afternoon, after finishing up my Zaxby's, I went shopping. So now I want to backtrack even farther, all the way to 8th grade. So as most of y'all know, I struggled with depression in 8th grade. There was a couple of games though that really helped me get through depression, such as Clash Royale, Clash of Clans, and those are just a couple examples. But one game in particular was Miitopia. This was a 3DS game, and I've got to say, it was probably the weirdest game I ever played, but also one of the best games too. It's super fun, super weird, and overall such a phenomenal game. I even did an entire YouTube series on this back in early 2018, and each video had hundreds of views. However, all those videos are private, as you can probably guess. In February of 2021, they announced Miitopia was being remade for the Switch, and I was thrilled. Seeing a game that I used to absolutely love really brought back all the memories. It brought back memories of me playing this game on YouTube. It also brought back memories of me playing this game while my arms were broken. I also remember how I managed to beat the Tower of Dread, and how I got my whole party to level 50 with legendary gear, and how I 100%ed the game. I wish I could go back to those days of the post-depression period part 1. I can't go back to the past, but I can relive the past. So that's what I did playing Miitopia for the Switch. Of course without the broken arms, as well as playing it as a rising senior and not an 8th grader. But nonetheless, I was still getting the chance to relive the best time period of my life. So that was amazing. The set release date for this game was May 21st, 2021. Literally perfect timing, because this day was May 21st. So that afternoon, I went to buy it. Well, I actually bought a $50 and a $20 gift card for my Switch, as the store was out of stock. But no worries, I bought it on the eShop. Worked out well. I also bought $85 worth of music, and I renewed my Switch Online subscription for the next year. And then I saved $15 to save for the season pass next season in Clash Royale. Miitopia overall was an absolute blast to play. Bringing back all those great memories from the post-depression period part 1 really made me happy. So great we can make a post-depression period part 3 out of this. Nah, let's not. But nonetheless, this game is super fun to play, and I highly recommend it. That wasn't the only event happening that night, though. We also went to the Cheesecake Factory in Charlotte to celebrate my grandmother's 76th birthday. Overall, it was going to be me, my grandmother, my grandfather's dead, and my sister with with me driving. However, my parents wanted to go, mostly because they wanted cheesecake. So my dad drove instead, and honestly, I'm glad he did. Driving through Charlotte on a Friday night is not a very good thing for someone who's been driving for only 2 years to do. I believe I counted 5 people getting pulled over by the cops, as well as this one dumbass who pulled right in front of us. As someone who lives in Charlotte, I can confirm that yes, this is quite normal for not just Charlotte, but like every other busy interstate in the nation, as well as just every city. Yeah, I'm just gonna say interstate, So we had to wait quite a while before being served. More specifically, an hour 30 minutes. So we just walked through South Park Mall. Now, this mall is massive. Me and Dad walked around while the ladies went their way. Dad was trying to find clothes, although he had no luck finding clothes at an affordable price, since this mall made us feel like we were shopping in Abu Dhabi or somewhere super expensive. For me, I didn't even bother because I knew that these people were not playing around with these prices. So I just looked. After an hour 30 minutes, the Cheesecake Factory was ready to serve us. It took a lot of time for them to get the food though. I think we waited like an hour for our food. I ordered a cheeseburger and fries. However, on my cheeseburger, I asked that I have nothing but cheese on it. I also said American cheese for my cheese. Clearly, they didn't hear the American cheese part, as they also put a bunch of melted cheese as well as some sauce on it. The fries were also a little disappointing. Although I think I know why we got bad service, as we were kinda acting pretty crazily. In one case, my mom was reading out the different cheesecakes he offered, and the waiter literally was writing everything she said down. Yeah, he legit thought that we were about to order the entire menu. Not gonna lie, that would have been really funny if we did, although that would have been very expensive. Fortunately, Mom noticed our waiter writing down everything and she just started laughing. Out of embarrassment, our waiter then scribbled everything off. Another crazy thing we did involved a table. So this is a very wobbly table. In fact, after taking a sip of her water, Mom set the glass down and then the whole table wobbled so much that it spilled some of her water, as well as got the wrapper of mine and my grandmother's straw wet. Mom got a little frustrated at us for whatever reason, but that's her fault. It wasn't a big deal. We found literally a piece of cardboard at random and set it under the table, and then it completely fixed the situation. So all is good. Now, before I explain the final stupid thing we did, I want to mention cheesecake. So this was the first time I actually ate cheesecake. I got the Oreo cheesecake, and I gotta say, this cheesecake was amazing. It tasted so good. Only problem is that it was extremely sweet, so it actually took me a couple days to finish this slice. Now, I'm not sure what flavor my sister got, but she seemed to really like it. So at the perfect time, Dad managed to take a picture of her eating the cheesecake. It was an extremely embarrassing but funny picture. My sister was not very impressed by it, but we all thought it was funny. So Dad sent it to all of us at the table. I then of course sent it to a couple friends. It was really funny. Overall, I think my grandmother enjoyed this. As crazy and weird the celebration was, we still had a great time. We'll do it again next year. So yeah, that was my last day of school. It's crazy how I just finished my last full year of school, as my senior year is only going to be a semester long. I was talking to Dylan the other day. It felt like yesterday that he was helping me climb up the first rock when we were rock climbing on the 5th day of freshman year. We were both only 14 years old. Now here we are. We're both rising seniors. Dylan is 17 and I'm almost 17. It's crazy how far we've come. Now we're both graduating in December, as he's also graduating early. Insane how far we've come. I also think back to my English teacher. The difference between our relationship in freshman year compared to junior year. In freshman year, I was her least favorite student. I was so rebellious. And then in junior year, I was one of her stars. It really comes to show how much I've grown and how much mature I've become since freshman year. In 9th grade, English, I made an 88. In 11th grade English, I made a 98. That's another difference too. My grade increased drastically. So for the aftermath, I really don't have much. After all, it's only been about a couple weeks since I've finished junior year. So, but as mentioned before, this was my last full school year, and all I gotta say is that I think I did everything I wanted to this year. Only thing I did not get done was scenario 4, but other than that, I consider junior year to be successful, despite being the most unusual school year I ever had. So that's all I got for today's story time. Next week on, I literally said that next week on June 4th. It's like June 12th, so. But anyways, that's all I got for this story time, and I'll see you guys later. Bye. Well, not really bye, because let's read the chat now, because we are done. Yeah, I know you're late. One day you should teach me all your YouTube mojos so I can start doing cool stuff like this, like story times and all sorts of stuff. Well, on December the 24th of 2021, I'm going to be doing a 1-year anniversary special for Storytime, where I'm going to talk about the history of Storytime, and then I'm also going to talk about the history of Storytime setups, too. So I think that'll be, so I think you'll really like that. That won't be until Christmas Eve, though. Crazy thing, one time out on the interstate with my dad, an old man pulled around us on the left and we were stopped. Slammed his brakes as we were about to go. Yeah, people are crazy on interstates. Like, people are crazy everywhere. Like, just the other day, I went to go get takeout, and on my way back, I ended up getting behind this dumbass. Not only, and I should know that it was raining very hard. And it was night. Not only did this dumbass not have his lights on, but he pulled into a KFC, so you could tell that he was pretty stupid. My dad, of course, honked the horn. The old man got out of his car and came up to my dad, who's in a big box truck, and started swinging. Swinging with a tripod. Out of all the things he could try to hit your dad with, he uses a tripod. It's his fault for being stupid. I hope that dude got the cop. I hope that dude got the cops pulled on him because he deserves it. I know I've got one viewer on, but I don't even know who it is. It's probably Robbie, but we'll just see what his next comment is. I'm gonna, once again, just like yesterday, I'm gonna stay on for a little while, and so y'all can ask questions as well as like give any comments. So yeah. Yeah, I'm also on my phone playing Clash of Clans. Yeah. That was a pretty difficult story time to do. Like, that was, that story time lasted, I'd say maybe, I want to say that lasted about an hour, 52 minutes, I think that story time was. I think seriously, he used a tripod with a camera, and my dad threw his camera, and just, yeah. I mean, your dad should just be like, haha, sucker, I'm out of here. That's exactly how he should have reacted. So, good for your dad. But, yeah, this story time, like, it started out by me reading, like, super fast. Like, for some reason, my throat was, like, wet. So, like, I was basically speaking Spanish, but English. Like, I was speaking very fast, but I was speaking English. Which is weird. You don't normally speak English that fast. Because, I mean, in Spanish you do because it flows off the tongue. But for English, it doesn't really flow off the tongue. So, like, kind of weird that I spoke that fast. But I got better as story time progressed because my throat got drier. So, when my throat's drier, I think that's when I do best recording story times. Now I'm going to choke on some soda. Okay, I'm not gonna choke on soda. But yeah, like as the video progressed, I started talking. I know you make these songs, but my own. Oh yeah, I should probably. That's the thing though. Like, when it comes to story time, I don't like taking like breaks within. I mean, I have paragraphs, but, like, for me, I just think that, like, I think the main reason why I do these so fast is because of, I don't have to, I can take my time with these. The reason I used to talk super fast was because I was recording with gameplay, and so I think that's one thing that I have to work on, because, obviously, I'm no longer recording gameplay, and so I'm not limited on a time frame. I literally have all day to do this, so I should take my sweet time. I think I should speak more slowly, and yeah, it would give more emotion. But yeah, and of course, you'll know that next story time I'm doing will be on Thursday. I'm gonna be talking about the history of my YouTube channel. I'm not doing it Friday because that Friday I'm gonna be in Raleigh, and then that Saturday we're going to the beach. So. Yeah, and of course the week that I'm at, Storytime 26 will not be released until July 2nd. I'm not even doing a Storytime the week after, or I'm not even doing a Storytime next week. So just because I'm gonna be at the beach, and because even if I wasn't at the beach, I would still be taking a break from Storytime because, or from YouTube in general, because I decided that that now that I've done YouTube for 5 years now, I think it's time that I break for a week. So I'll be taking another break in the last week of July too, because we're gonna be in Philadelphia. So I told you all this yesterday, but just in case you're watching back this and didn't hear. I know Robbie, you heard it, but like, if someone's rewatching this, oh yeah, like you're a legend. You literally watched the whole thing, which, I mean, for me, I love rewatching my story times. Like, I always go back and watch the whole thing, just because it's just, I don't know, like, most people hate. I know most people hate, and I used to be like this too. Most people hate watching their own videos. Like, they're always so embarrassed by their voice. For me, I'm actually don't really mind my voice that much. Like, I actually really like watching my old videos. Well, not old. Some of them are really cringe, but like my story times, I love rewatching them. They're always really fun to watch. So, and yeah, you're a legend. You're constantly watching them. But I mean, here's the thing though. Many people, like at school, they watch the whole story time. Like, I mean, my friends do. My dad also watches story time. He always watches the whole thing. Like, according to him, every Monday, he actually, on his way to work, he actually listens to the most recent story time. Which, I mean, it's weird that my dad watches it, but honestly, I don't really mind too much. So for most people, that kind of weirds them out, but for me, I don't care that my dad watches, like, my videos. Like, I mean, come on. I'm on YouTube. I'm available for anyone to... I'm available... Like, anybody can watch my videos because it's YouTube. So, even if that means my own dad. So... But I don't mind him watching it. I think it's actually pretty... I actually really like that he watches my videos, just because... It gives us some discussion, as well as just because he gets to learn a bit more about me, because, being honest, I'm not very open with him, so, or with mom, like, with my parents, I never really talk to them much, so, like, this story time kind of gives them the chance to be able to learn about me, so, and the reason is just, I honestly feel pretty embarrassed when I talk to them about this stuff, but whenever I do it in front of a camera and they listen to it, or not in front of the camera, in front of a mic, I think that it doesn't embarrass me, and I actually have fun doing it. So, I usually don't like stretch videos, but I don't mind a good story. Yeah, there's some good stories in this one. Junior year was pretty fun. Overall, junior year was a great year. It was heavily impacted by coronavirus, but... story time, but it's secretly the story of Nate the Snake. I don't even know what Nate the Snake is, but I mean, I guess I'm a snake now. I'm afraid of snakes, so like that's really creepy. I'm afraid of myself now. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, like, obviously story time is very long, or generally very long videos. Like, the shortest story time I have is like 11 minutes long. And the longest story time is literally this story time. I believe it clocked in an hour 52 minutes. And then my 8th grade story time was an hour 36. So, not only that, but the average duration for a story time is generally about 40 minutes. So, like, I would spend a lot of time on story time. Like, I think I'll be talking about how much time I spend specifically on Storytime next week, but basically, I spend a lot of time. Back when I used to do gameplay, I believe I generally worked about 5 hours on Storytime. That does not include writing the script. It only includes uploading, gameplay, and recording. So... No, I've never heard the story of Nate the Snake. I've never actually heard of that. So, I guess I live under a rock or something. Yeah, I've never heard of that. But, yeah. I work quite I do a lot of work on story time. So, and I mean, it's good for me. I think one thing that I'm gonna talk about in story time is that right after you. Yeah, I probably should. But I one thing I like about story time is that like it's not like of course when I recorded like even when I recorded my Dipman videos when I was like 12 and 13, those helped me out with speaking up, and also recording the Minecraft series that helped me out with speaking up. But I think Storytime overall has been probably the most positive. It's probably had the best impacts on me. Like Storytime has helped me speak up a lot louder, but not just that. Storytime has also made me a better public speaker. Like I literally did I believe in I believe sometime I think it was for I think in English once I had to present something. I forgot what it was, but like I spoke so clearly. This was like in April. It was like I had just been doing story time for 4 months then, and like, but even then the effects shown. Like I did very well. Like I literally was able to speak very well. I didn't say every 2 seconds, and I stayed very loud. I stayed loud and concise. I mean, yeah, I did take public speaking in 10th grade, but, like, I barely remember anything for public speaking, so I'm just saying that you can't go wrong with a good Pokemon Showdown. Oh, yeah, Speed Beans, yes. You can't go wrong, honestly. Like, Pokemon Showdown streams, especially with you, they're so fun. Like, once again, I still haven't figured out why my mic isn't working for Discord. I've still got to figure it out. But once I do that, we are going to upload a Pokemon Showdown stream. I guarantee you it. We're going to do it. That'll happen one day. Don't worry. So, and it'll still continue. Those streams will still probably happen in college, cause I just make them super funny. Yeah, I mean, I play competitive Pokemon, but I don't play it competitively. Like I do it for fun. And of course you're the same way. We're not trying to make the best team. We're literally doing it for fun. So, and I mean, if you're not having fun with something, why do it? Like, I mean, my dad said that if you find a job that you like, you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, I don't know if y'all have heard that saying before, but like that's true. Like, if you do what you love, then you never will work a day in your life. Like, my mom is an example. She's a teacher, and she loves it. Like, she wasn't originally a teacher, but, like, she came into teaching, and she loves teaching. And my dad, I'm not sure exactly if he likes his job, but I'm assuming he does. I mean, I'd make fun of him because he has to sit in an office all day doing business stuff. But, I mean, to be honest, I also am kind of jealous of my dad's job. Like, he gets to travel a lot. Like, I believe, like, tomorrow he's going to Fayetteville, then on Wednesday he's going to Charleston. Last week he went to Chicago. Like, he travels a ton. Which, I mean, yeah, I don't get to see him too much, but, like, that's so cool, though. He gets to travel all over. He's been to Germany twice. Not only that, but he's also been to Detroit. He's been to Detroit, which is he about got shot there. I'm just kidding. He stayed in downtown Detroit. He didn't go into like the dangerous parts. And then he also went to I believe he's been to I want to think that he's been to Dillon, South Carolina. He's been to for work. I want to think that he's been to Indianapolis for work, but I'm not too sure. I mean, my dad has literally been to like I believe 4 countries total, and all of them were for business related. He went to Canada once, and then he went to Germany for twice. The first time he was in Germany, he also went to France. So like, he's lucky. I mean, I want to be a mathematician, and hopefully I'll be able to travel too, because I love traveling. So, me and Ryan found a game mode where you can give any Pokemon any other Pokemon's medicine. Oh, so you can make weird combos like. Oh god, Lucario. No. Oh god. That might be fun to check out whenever the next Pokemon Showdown stream is. Anyways, I'm getting tired, so I'm gonna end the stream. So, hope y'all guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys Friday.